called Paul Vercollone.
Come right up.
Sir, do you solemnly swear the testimony you are about to give in the cause now in hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated.
Come up, sir. Please just take a moment, please, His Honor. You can have a seat. Make yourself comfortable if you could, please, sir. Good morning.
Morning.
Within a motion to sequester witnesses in the case, all that means is until all the evidence is over, you may only be in the courtroom when you testify. You can't talk about your testimony with the other witnesses. I'll let him talk about this with you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good morning, sir. In a loud, clear voice, can you state your first and last name, please?
Paul Vercollone,
Can you spell your last name?
V as in Victor, E-R-C-O-L-L-O-N-E.
And sir, how are you employed?
Self-employed.
And what type of business do you have?
Convenience store, gas station, car wash.
And which gas company is your gas station affiliated with?
This particular one is a Gulf station.
Do you own more than one?
Yes.
Do you own one on Route 1 in the town of Danvers?
Yes.
And what is the street address for your Gulf station and market on Route 1 in Danvers?
I don't know.
Do you know what Route 1 is called? Is it Newberry Street?
Yes.
Okay. And where is that station located with respect to the Topsfield line? Do you know that?
I do not.
Okay. Sir, are you familiar, let me ask you this, can you explain for the jury, please, you said you have a gas station, a car wash, and a store, is that correct?
This particular site is service station with convenience store.
Okay. And with respect to the store, is there video surveillance in place at your store?
Yes.
And are you aware that in October of 2013, Danvers police came and collected video that had been taken in the early morning of October 23rd of 2013?
Yes.
I apologize, I'm going to reapproach the minute.
Sure.
Out of breath. Sir, are there 3 different cameras in your gas station? Or 3 perspectives, I guess?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Possibly.
Okay. And I'm handing you a video, and do you know that that's the video that was provided to the Danvers Police by the employees of your gas station?
It has my company name on it.
Thank you. And that's this being produced, Your Honor. No objection.
Committed.
Exhibit 126. So marked.
And if we could play the videos, Your Honor.
Sure.
Do you recognize this is your gas station, sir?
Yes.
And what perspective is this camera?
This is showing the transaction counter where the cashier would be standing.
And in the upper right corner, does that just capture a little bit of the doorway?
Pardon me?
The door, is that captured in the upper right hand?
Yes.
Okay. You could play the next video. And what's the perspective of this camera?
Okay, so that's the far side of the store showing the transaction counter straight on and the entrance door to the right.
How far back does the store go from this?
Well, this camera would probably be mounted on the rear wall.
Okay. And if we could play the final video. I have nothing further for this witness, Your Honor.
No questions.
All right, thank you, sir.
Okay.
James Murphy.
Sir, do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the cause now in hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated.
I'll see this really comfortable cases on it for 1 moment before we begin. In a motion to sequester witnesses in this case until all the evidence is over. All that means is that you may only be in the courtroom when you testify. You can't talk about your testimony with the other witnesses. I'll let them talk about theirs with you. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, sir. In a loud, clear voice, can you state your first and last names?
James Murphy,
And could you spell your names?
Jamesmurphy.
Sir, how are you employed?
I am the manager of the Danvers Mobil.
And where is the Danvers Mobile Station located?
420 Newbury Street, Danvers, Mass.
And does Newbury Street have is referred to by something, other title?
Old Route 1.
Okay. And do you know where your mobile is with respect to the Topsfield line?
Probably like a mile from there.
Okay.
or
A
two.
mile south of the Topsfield line?
Yes.
Sir, are you familiar with a Gulf station as well near your store?
Yes, directly across.
I'm sorry.
Directly across, sorry.
Okay, directly across Old Route 1? Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay. And sir, how long have you been the manager of the Danvers Mobile?
Since 2008.
And what services does your mobile station offer?
Lottery, tobacco, cigarettes.
So is there a
Gas.
store in addition to a gas station?
There's a Dunkin' Donuts as well, yes.
Just project your voice louder
sorry.
if you could, please, sir. Thank you.
Sir, what are the hours of your mobile station?
24/7.
Okay. And drawing your attention to October of 2013, were you contacted at some point by the Danvers Police after October 23rd?
Yes,
Does your store have a video surveillance system?
we do.
And where is it located?
Throughout the store.
Okay. And after the police contacted you, were you able to pull some video or produce some video for them of just after midnight on October 23rd?
Correct.
May I approach this witness, Your Honor?
Sure.
Handing you a DVD, sir. Are you familiar that that's a DVD taken from your store just after midnight on October 23rd, 2013?
Yes.
I'd ask this to be introduced as the next exhibit. No objection.
Admitted.
Exhibit 127, so marked.
And if we could play the mobile video, Your Honor.
Sure.
So what view is this of your store?
It's from behind the cash register.
Okay, thank you. And I apologize, sir, I said just after midnight. In fact, it's just before midnight, is that correct?
Yes.
In the direction that the individual in the blue sweatshirt is looking, what would he be looking at?
It looked like he was looking for a clock.
Okay. Is there a clock in your store, by the way?
No, we do not.
Okay. I have nothing further for this witness, Your Honor.
No questions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Your Honor, before I call my next witness, would it be possible to, there's a chair here all of a sudden.
What do you need? I'm sorry.
There was a chair blocking. We've had a little rearrangement since last week.
Okay.
Thank you. The Commonwealth calls Sheauling Kastor.
Could I ask the counsel on this issue for a moment, please? Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, after we swear in the witness, I'm going to give you a instruction.
Miss, would you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the cause now in hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. You may be seated.
Take a seat, please, and if your face is on for that moment, you can sit. Good morning. There's been a motion in the case to sequester witnesses. All that means is until the evidence is over, you may only be in the courtroom when you're testifying. You can't talk about your testimony with the other witnesses or allow them to talk about their testimony with you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll recall during my preliminary instructions I told you about two types of evidence. I told you about testimony of witnesses and exhibits, and I said there might be two other types of evidence, and if they arise, I would tell you about them. One, judicial notice. We've already had judicial notice in one instance. Another type of evidence is a stipulation or agreement between the parties. And is this stipulation as to fact or as to what the testimony would be? As to fact?
Fact.
Okay. You agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a stipulation between counsel, and I'll ask Ms. Regan if she could please read it to the jury.
Stipulation regarding DNA standards. The parties agree the attached documents are respectively the YSPR DNA profile of Mr. Chism and the STR DNA profile of Mr. Chism and Ms. Ritzer. The defendant agrees that the Commonwealth need not call Kara Tremblay, an analyst who processed these standards, and that they can be testified to by the analyst, Ms. Kastor, who's on the stand. Further, the defendant agrees that the YSTR standard for the defendant may be included in a comparison chart shown to the jury and admitted for identification. And Ms. McDougall and I have agreed to this. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Regan. Yes, please, Ms. McDougall.
Good morning, ma'am. In a loud, clear voice, can you state your first and last names?
Yes, my name is Sheauling Kastor.
And can you spell your first and last names, please?
Yes. Sheauling. Last name Kastor, Kastor.
And Ms. Kastor, how are you employed?
I'm employed by the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab in the DNA unit.
How long have you been employed by the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab?
Approximately 7.5 years.
And I'm just going to ask you to keep your voice up because the projector's now on, so it makes things a little hard to hear. And can you describe for us your educational background, please?
Yes, I have a bachelor's degree in biology from Fairfield University and a master's degree in forensic science from the University of New Haven.
And when you arrived at this, when you were first employed by the crime lab, did you undergo any training in-house?
Yes, I was required to complete in-house training. It's a 6-month period where I processed mock DNA samples. I interpreted DNA samples. I took classroom time and also had written and oral tests. And I also completed competency tests before I was signed off as a certified DNA analyst.
And do you undergo ongoing quality assurance controls throughout the lab, both in terms of your capacities as well as in terms of the testing that you're doing?
Yes, that's correct. I am undergoing proficiency tests every 6 months. It's a test given by an outside agency where I am given samples and I process it as if it were casework. I report the DNA profiles that I obtain, and I get a satisfactory or an unsatisfactory mark.
And are you currently in good standing with respect to all of your competency exams?
Yes, I am.
Now, in addition to, you indicated you're assigned to the DNA unit, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Are you also cross-trained in other disciplines that are done by the lab?
Yes, I am also cross-trained as a crime scene response unit personnel.
Now, ma'am, can you please explain to us what DNA is?
Yes, DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. It's a genetic blueprint for human attributes such as height, hair color, eye color. And DNA comes from our parents, so half your DNA comes from your mother and half of your DNA comes from your father. 99% of our DNA is exactly the same. That's why we have 10 fingers and 10 toes, 2 arms and 2 legs. That less than 1% of DNA that's different is what we look for in forensic DNA typing, DNA analysis. That's how we individualize people and determine what DNA comes from what source. Everyone's DNA is different except for that of identical twins.
In that 1% of the DNA that you look at, is there a particular portion of that you look at?
Yes. The specific locations we look at on the DNA are throughout the DNA, and they're highly variable, so there's many different variations in those locations, and there's 15 locations that we look at, plus a melanogenin, which is the sex indicator, XX for female, XY for male.
And does your lab and do you conduct more than one type of DNA testing?
Yes, the lab conducts the usual DNA STR testing. That's on the entire human genome, all the chromosomes, and then we have YSTR testing, which is done only on the male portion of the DNA, the Y chromosome.
And under what circumstances typically would you do Y testing versus STR testing?
Typically, we do YSTR testing when we suspect that there's going to be a large amount of female DNA that could overshadow the male DNA that we would want to look for, or when sometimes there's a very low amount. We know there's going to be a very low amount of male versus a very high amount of female.
And typically, would that include if something was taken from a female's body or a female's person, where you suspect there's male DNA, but you know there's going to be that person's DNA?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, in this particular case, let me ask you this. Do you go into your testing knowing whether you're going to do Y or STR, or is there a step in your process at which you make that determination?
Based on the description type, and the results from the criminalistics report, we can determine that maybe this sample is going to go for YSTR testing, but we don't ultimately make the decision until the second step of DNA analysis.
And in particular, in this case, were you given the sperm fraction of or actually, let me ask you this, were you given the vaginal swab taken from the kit of Colleen Ritzer to conduct DNA testing on?
Yes, that's correct.
And did you have any information going into your testing that gave you a sense of whether you were going to do Y or STR?
Yes. I did note that there was a sperm cell that was found. I was given that information, so I had an idea that YSTR testing was going to be amenable.
Can you, let me ask you this, can you describe the process you go through to do Y testing? And actually, can you describe the process you went through in this particular case?
Yes. For the YSTR testing, we use a 4-step DNA analysis process. We because I knew that there was a sperm cell, I used what we call a differential extraction, which is the first step. So extraction is the first step, but because of the sperm cell that was indicated, I used differential extraction, which basically allows me to separate sperm cells from all other cells in the sample. So I take the sample, it comes in a tube, I add heat and chemicals, and I separate the sperm fraction from the rest of the cells, which we call the epithelial fraction, and then I clean out both, so we end up with a sperm fraction tube and an epithelial fraction tube with the rest of the cells. And then I clean up those samples, and I take those samples and I put them through the second step, which is quantitation. Quantitation basically just allows me to determine the amount of DNA that I have in those tubes. So I can see, okay, how much total DNA and how much male DNA do I have in both tubes, how much total and how much male DNA. And based on that, I'm able to come up with a ratio. Am I going to be able to expect to get a good male profile from a sample versus am I not going to expect? So if it's in a certain ratio, say like 100 to 1 human to male, then I would go for YSTR testing. So if the ratio's too large, then I will go for YSTR testing, knowing that I will probably end up with too much female in that sample. So in this case, I did go forward with the YSTR testing because I noticed that there was too much female. And at that step, I go to the third step, which is amplification. And amplification, I make millions of copies of the different locations, that 1% of DNA that's different between individuals. I make in the YSTR, with the YSTR kit, looking for just the male DNA, there are 17 locations that I look for, and a profile is obtained at the fourth step. It's called analysis. So at analysis, a profile gets produced, and the numbers get determined by a computer or an instrument, and I'm able to come up with the DNA profile. And once I have that profile, I can compare it to any known profiles that I have and make conclusions.
Now, you said that an instrument measures the DNA, is that correct?
Yes.
And when you're looking at it, what does it look like to you on that instrument?
It looks sort of like a heart monitor with the lines, and then a line comes up, and then there's a blip, and then another, it goes back down, and then it comes up again, there's another blip, and every time that spike occurs, that blip occurs, that means that there's a piece of DNA there.
And does the computer or the program assign a size and a number to that blip?
Yes, the instrument is given what we call an allelic ladder. It's basically a ladder of a whole bunch of DNA pieces that we know what they are. It's a known standard to compare to. So that ladder has many, many blips, and we can take the profile, the questions profile that we're looking for. When the DNA pops up, we can compare it to that ruler, per se, and assign it a number.
And in this case, were you able to generate a Y profile for the sperm fraction of the vaginal swab taken from Colleen Ritzer?
Yes, I was able to obtain a partial YSTR profile.
And can you explain to the jury why you were able to obtain a partial profile?
A partial profile is a profile that doesn't include all 17 locations of the DNA that we were looking for. Only some of the locations were able to be obtained, and that's what we mean by a partial profile. That means we basically did not have that much DNA to work with. If we had plenty of DNA to work with, we would have a full profile, but because there was a smaller amount of DNA to work with from the beginning, from the start, we have a partial profile.
Did you come across any other challenges in producing the profile for the sperm fraction of the vaginal swab when you were doing your four-step process?
Yes, while doing the four-step process, I encountered a problem at step 2, quantitation. I was not able to determine how much male there was. I noticed that there was a significant amount of female, but I couldn't see with the instrument and the second step of quantitation how much male. And so I did a couple different things. I did dilutions to try to kind of thin out anything that could be inhibiting the profile from being seen. So I did, like a 1 to 10 and a 1 to 20 and a 1 to 50 dilution, and I was still unable to see anything. So I tried to concentrate the sample and kind of clean it up a little bit, and then did step 2 over again. So I did step 2 over again. I was still not able to see anything that would tell me how much male there was. So we determined that we would just go forward, amplify it, and see what we get.
And in fact, the fact that you were able to get a partial Y profile confirms that there was male DNA there. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And based on your training and experience, Ms. Kastor, what kinds of things could cause that inhibition that you saw at the second step?
There's many different things that could inhibit DNA. That's why we clean up so much of it at the first step so that we can get the best profile we're able to obtain. And certain things are soil, leather, dyes. Certain dyes will inhibit the DNA processing. Hemoglobin and urea are some other examples.
Thank you. Now, did you, when you're doing any kind of DNA testing and you're testing the question samples, meaning samples that have come from other items, do you handle the standards?
I do not.
And what are the standards?
The standards are known profiles from individuals, taken directly from individuals.
And in this case, did you receive from another analyst the Y profile for Philip Chism?
Yes, I did.
And were you able to conduct a comparison between his Y profile and the partial sperm profile you got from the sperm fraction of the vaginal swab?
Yes, I was able to make a comparison.
May I approach this witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Showing you a chart, Ms. Kastor, does that chart depict the DNA profile as you ultimately see it of Philip Chism with the partial DNA profile you obtained from the vaginal swab?
Yes, it is.
I would ask if you just mark for identification, Your Honor, and display it to the jury.
You may.
This will be R, this was Q. Okay. R for identification. Q, mark stipulation is Q. Q is a timeline.
I could give you a pointer. Now, Ms. Kastor, before we begin, how does this profile differ from an STR profile?
This profile is coming from only the Y chromosome. So it's not looking through the entire rest of the human genome or other chromosomes. It's just for the male part, the Y chromosome. The Y chromosome is only present in males. Females have XX, 2 X chromosomes, whereas males have an X chromosome and a Y chromosome. When we look at the sections on the Y chromosome that are passed down from father to son, and so forth, and so these profiles could be shared between father and son and brothers. It would be the same. So unfortunately, it's not going to be able to individualize and tell me exactly which person, specifically which person this DNA profile came from, but it will narrow down father, son, any patrilineal line.
So the only people who should have the same Y profile as Philip Chism are any male relatives along the fraternal line?
That's correct.
Now, can you just explain to us what we're looking at? What are the descriptions on the left-hand column where it says sample description?
The samples here, the numbers here on the left-hand column are the different locations that we look for on the Y chromosome. For example, if you look at the first one, DYS456, D stands for DNA, Y stands for Y chromosome, S stands for single copy, and 456 is just the number. It's like an address on the Y chromosome. So all of these have some similar naming scheme here. These are the locations we look at that vary, highly variable between individuals.
And how many of the locations on the Y profile for the sperm fraction from the vaginal swab were you able to obtain a number that you can call?
If you look over here, this is the vaginal swab sperm fraction sample that I was testing. Mm-hmm. And anywhere here where you have a number, I was able to call a piece of DNA. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 locations.
And what do the asterisks reflect?
The asterisks reflect pieces of DNA that are between our calling threshold and our noise threshold. So basically, if you think of a radio, and you're trying to get the station to come in, and you hear kind of a static, and then you get to another station where you hear like little pieces of noise come up. Music, you know that's music. You know that's you're aware that that's somebody talking on the radio, but you're not getting the full understanding of what song that is or what that person's talking about. That DNA that comes up kind of peeks itself out is what we call an asterisk here, and we're able to, the instrument's not able to call it, but we're able to use the ruler to determine what pieces of DNA that is.
So let me ask you this, you can't give a number to those locations, but if you saw information inconsistent with Philip Chism's profile, would you factor that in?
Objection.
As it relates to the foundation, I'll see counsel at the sidebar for a moment, please.
Ms. Kastor, when you yourself are examining that, the blips, what looks like sort of an EKG, are you able to make your own assessment of the information that is being produced as the DNA is sent through the machine?
Yes.
And for those areas that are below threshold, for which are represented by an asterisk, are you able to see information there, hear those little blips of noise on the radio, for lack of a better?
Yes, that's correct.
And you can't assign a number to those locations, nor can the machine. Is that fair to say?
The instrument doesn't assign the numbers because it's below our calling thresholds, and the instrument only assigns numbers above the calling threshold. So those peaks below threshold are actually assigned by myself and also by my double reader. It's an additional person who looks at the DNA profiles and does their own assessment without talking to me first.
So you assign a number, but you don't report the number. Would that be fair to say?
That's correct. We don't want to report the number because we don't want to do any statistical analysis at that location, which could skew the meaning of the data.
But if the number you assign at a given location is not consistent with the standard you have, would you exclude that person as the source of the Y profile?
Yes, that's correct.
So you use that information for exclusion but not for inclusion, is that correct?
I wouldn't say that exactly. I would, we use those numbers to make our conclusions, either exclude or include. And if there's an inconsistency, if it doesn't match up, then we would definitely take that into account. We wouldn't just, say, oh, the ones that are called match, the ones that don't, we take that into account. And if, and on the flip side, if they...
Okay. Objection from this point on, or objection to the whole...
From this point.
Okay. Objection sustained. You can have another question if you like it.
Thank you. Ms. Kastor, you just mentioned something about statistics. Are you able to generate, well, actually, before we go into that, there's a couple of locations that say NR. Can you tell us what that is?
Yes, if you look here, and here, you'll see NR. NR just means no results. There was no piece of DNA at that location that we could see.
So you can't get any information at that location?
That's correct.
And again, what are some of the causes that why does that happen? Why is there just no information in those locations?
Typically you see NRs when there's a low level of DNA. So the DNA that we started out with wasn't, expected to be a lot of DNA, and it's typical that something like that, a partial profile, would have some locations that have no results.
Now, you mentioned earlier about generating statistics. So in this case, would it be fair to say you were able to generate statistics for the 8 locations where you could report a number?
Yes, that's correct.
And how are the statistics generated? How does that work?
With YSCR testing, because it is passed down from father to son, we do what we call a counting method. Basically, we have a database with thousands and thousands of profiles, and we count how many times we see this profile in that database. With this, we just counted how many times we saw the profile with the 8 locations.
And are you then able to generate a statistical frequency of that profile within various populations?
Yes, that's correct.
And is there any real significance, let me ask you this, the various populations that they use, do they correlate in any way to the defendant's ethnicity?
We use 4 different population databases, and it's, Caucasian, Hispanic, Asian, African American, and we just use those 4 because they're, the most, there's many other different population groups, but these are the most ones that represent our state, and there's no real significance between the different population groups. We just do that to try to get every single population, but there's no significant difference between them.
When DNA was first getting started, did anyone know whether there would be significant variations among different ethnic groups?
No, they didn't.
So is that why multiple groups are used in case there is differentiation among different ethnic groups?
Yes, that's correct.
And with respect to the profile, the 8-location profile you were able to generate for the sperm fraction, what was the statistical frequency of that profile within the various populations?
Okay. Your Honor, may I refer to my notes
If
for...
your memory is exhausted and there's no objection.
No objection.
Yes, you may.
The statistical significance, the frequency of occurrence of this profile from the vaginal swabs, it's 1 in 521 of the African American population, 1 in 1,114 of the Asian population, 1 in 167 of the Caucasian population, and 1 in 455 of the Hispanic population.
In addition to the frequency with which a profile appears in those populations, are you also able to generate a statistic for the percentage of those populations who are excluded as the sources of that profile?
Yes, I was.
And can you give us those, what percentage of the population is excluded as a source of that 8-location profile?
Based on the frequency, I was able to calculate the percent exclusion as 99.8% excluded from the African American population, 99.91% of the Asian population excluded, 99.4% of the Caucasian population excluded, and 99.78% of the Hispanic population excluded.
Thank you. We could get the lights on. Now, at some point, did you receive some additional items in this case for DNA testing?
Yes, I did.
And with respect to those items, were you able to do, ultimately able to do STR testing?
Yes, I was able to do STR DNA testing, which is testing, DNA testing on all of the chromosomes, not just the Y chromosome.
And how many items, if you remember, did you receive for testing in this case, ultimately?
I received 8 items for STR testing.
And if we could start with the swab of the red-brown stain from the left palm of Philip Chism, was that an item that you received for testing?
Yes, it was.
And did you go through that 4-step process with respect to the swab of the red-brown stain on the left palm of Philip Chism?
Yes, I did. And in these cases, I didn't separate, a sperm fraction and an epithelial fraction, because we didn't have any sperm present in this. We're looking for red-brown stain. So I just did a regular extraction with 1 tube, going through the whole process of the 4 steps.
And were you able to generate a profile for the DNA from the swab of the red-brown stain on the left palm of Philip Chism?
Yes, I was.
Did that profile have 1 contributor or more than 1 contributor?
That profile had a mix of at least 2 individuals.
And for you, when you're looking on that EKG, how do you know there's more than 1 contributor?
If you recall from what I said before, that half your DNA comes from your mother and half your DNA comes from your father. You should get 1 piece of DNA from your mother and 1 from your father for a total of 2 pieces of DNA. If I see 3 pieces of DNA or more, that indicates to me that there is a mixture and it's not just from 1 person.
Is there such a thing as a major and a minor contributor to a profile?
Yes. If someone contributes a substantial amount of DNA more than another person, you'll get what we call a major profile versus a minor profile. So that major profile will have blips on that EKG that are way up high, versus that minor profile will have tiny little blips down below. And so you can determine that all the ones with the major big amounts of DNA is the major profile, where all the smaller ones are the minor.
And in the case of the red-brown stain on the left palm of Philip Chism, was there a major profile?
Yes, there was.
And were you able to compare that major profile to an STR profile you received for Philip Chism?
Yes.
And let me ask you this. Ultimately, with respect to this item, was there another item that had the same statistics as this item?
Yes.
So I'm going to go through that item so you don't have to repeat the statistics multiple times. Okay. So with respect to, did you also examine a swab of a red-brown stain with flow from the wall near the door of the 2nd floor bathroom?
Yes, that's correct.
And again, with respect to that particular item, were you able to generate a DNA profile for that item?
Yes, I was able to obtain a profile with a mixture of at least 2 individuals.
And again, with respect to that item, was there a major and a minor?
Yes, there was a major and a major female with a minor.
And with respect to those 2 items, did you compare the major profile you obtained from the swab of the red-brown stain on the left palm of Philip Chism and the swab of the red-brown stain with flow from the bathroom to the DNA profiles of Colleen Ritzer and Philip Chism?
I did.
And what were your results with respect to the comparison to Colleen Ritzer's DNA profile?
The major female profile that I obtained from both those items matched Colleen Ritzer.
And what is the statistical frequency of that particular DNA profile that matched that of Colleen Ritzer?
May I look at? Thank you.
There's no objection. If your memory's exhausted, you may.
Thank you.
I apologize, I didn't hear the...
She can refer to her notes to read
Yes,
this.
oh, no objection, sorry.
So the frequency of the profile obtained from the major female profiles obtained from those items were 1 in 49.04 sextillion. For the African American population, 1 in 20.53 sextillion of the Asian population, 1 in 22.51 quintillion of the Caucasian population, and 1 in 248 quintillion of the Hispanic population.
And, ma'am, do you know how many people are believed to be on the planet at this point, approximately?
Approximately 6.5 billion.
And fair to say that billions are less than sextillions or quintillions, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Now, in addition to those 2 items, was there also another series of items that ultimately ended up having the same statistical frequency?
Yes.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this before we move on. What was the results of your comparison to Philip Chism of those 2 items, the swab of the red-brown stain on the left palm and the swab of the red-brown stain with flow?
Philip Chism's profile did not match the major female profile from those items.
He's excluded as a source of those profiles, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, did you also test swabs or scrapings from white stains on the interior crotch of the underpants recovered from Philip Chism's backpack?
Yes, I did.
And were you able to obtain a DNA profile from that item?
Yes, I was able to obtain a single-source female profile.
And similarly, were you able to obtain a profile from a swab of a red-brown stain on the blade of a box cutter recovered from Philip Chism's backpack?
Yes, I was also able to obtain a single-source female profile.
And also, were you able to obtain a profile from a swab of a red-brown stain at the end of the stick near the vaginal area of Colleen Ritzer at Danvers High School?
Yes, I obtained a single-source female profile.
Additionally, were you able to obtain a profile from the cutting of a red-brown stain on a toilet paper roll in the middle stall of the second-floor bathroom at Danvers High School?
Yes, I obtained a single-source female profile.
And finally, were you able to obtain a profile from a swab of a red-brown saturation stain on the left leg of jeans located in a wooded area at Danvers High School?
I obtained a single-source female profile from that item.
And with respect to those items, the swabbing from the underpants, from the box cutter, from the end of the stick or branch, from the toilet paper roll, and the jeans, did you compare fair to say you obtained the same single-source DNA profile from those items?
I did. It was the same female single-source profile.
And did you compare that profile to the profile of Colleen Ritzer?
I did.
And what were the results of that comparison?
Colleen Ritzer's DNA profile matched that of the single-source female profile obtained from those items.
And were you able to generate a statistical frequency for that particular profile?
Yes.
If you, is your memory exhausted as to what that statistical frequency is?
Yes.
If you could refer to your notes.
Thank you. The frequency of the single-source female profile obtained from these items were 1 in 49.04 sextillion of the African American population, 1 in 20.53 sextillion of the Asian population, 1 in 22.51 quintillion of the Caucasian population, and 248 quintillion, 1 in 248 quintillion of the Hispanic population.
And finally, ma'am, with respect to swabs or scrapings from the rear interior waistband of those pair of jeans that were found, in the woods, were you able to obtain a DNA profile from the swab or scrapings of the rear interior waistband?
Yes, I was able to obtain a DNA profile with a mixture of at least 2 individuals.
And did that have a major and a minor contributor?
It did.
Were you able to generate any results for the major profile in comparison to that of Colleen Ritzer?
The major female profile obtained matched the DNA profile from Colleen Ritzer.
And what was the statistical frequency of that profile? And if your memory is exhausted, if you could return to your notes.
The frequency of that major female profile is 1 in 49.04 sextillion of the African American population, 1 in 20.53 sextillion of the Asian population, 1 in 22.51 quintillion of the Caucasian population, and 1 in 248 quintillion of the Hispanic population.
And I'm not sure I asked you this with respect to the last series of items, including the underpants, the box cutter, and the branch, the toilet paper roll, and the jeans. What was the comparison to Philip Chism for those items?
He was excluded from those items.
And with respect to the last item, we talked about the swab or scraping of the interior of the waistband of the jeans. Was he included or excluded from the major profile?
He was excluded from the major profile.
If I could just have one moment, Your Honor.
Sure.
I have nothing further to Ms. Kastor.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Now, assume, or if, Foxborough Stadium holds approximately 60,000 people, okay? And if those 60,000 people were random African-American men, it's correct to assume that some of those men would have a profile like the profile you gave us the statistics on, correct?
I don't think I can say yes to that. I'm not quite understanding.
Well, if you take 60,000 random African-American men, given the statistics that you gave us today of 1 in 521, the statistics would indicate that there probably would be some men in the 60,000 random African-American men that had the profile.
It's an estimation. It's not really saying that because if you pool together this many people, there's going to be somebody there. It's more of an estimation to tell you how common or rare a profile is. Not necessarily that if you pull together random 60,000 people that someone's definitely going to be there, because it could be equally that all of them are going to have that profile versus none of them are going to have that profile.
But your statistic is a frequency statistic, right? It's how frequent it is over the population of African-American men, right?
It's a frequency that gives us kind of an estimation of how common or rare.
Right. And the estimation is 1 in 521 African-American men will have this profile.
Yes.
And the estimation is 1 in 167 Caucasian men will have this profile.
Yes.
So this statistic is nowhere near as precise as the statistic you gave us of the DNA testing you did on the other items, correct?
That's correct. The different methods of calculating.
And so the statistic means that in a group of 60,000 African-American men, that an estimate would be that 1 out of every 521 would have this profile.
Objection. I'll sustain the objection, but you can have the area of inquiry. Can I ask the counsel to sidebar for a moment, please?
Okay, I'm going to try this question just one more time. I'm sorry, I apologize. So assume that Foxborough Stadium holds 60,000 African American men that reflect the general population. It would be expected that a certain number of those men would have a profile that was consistent, right?
I can't say yes to you because it would be kind of misleading, because if you think of it like a lottery ticket system, you go buy a lottery ticket, you have a 1 in 1,000 chance of winning. You could win 2-3 times in that chance, or you could win not at all. So it's not a guarantee that you're going to find that someone with that profile, if you gather a group of men together. It's just to tell you how common or rare, like how often are you going to win? You're going to play a lottery with 1 in 100 chance to win, or 1 in 1,000 chance to win. It just tells you, oh, well, if I play this, you'll have more of a chance to win. So it's more of an estimation of just how common or rare. It's not a number that says this is definitely how many men you're going to find if you gather together this many people.
I'm not asking you to say definitively. What I'm asking you is that you could estimate that you would find some men that would fit the profile.
Yes, if you want to estimate how often or how common it's going to be, yes, that's the number. That's 1 in 521.
And for Caucasians, 1 out of 167 would, it could be estimated, would match the profile, correct?
Yes, that's the estimate, yeah.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Mr. Colleen Ritzer?
First of all, you don't only look at the African American and Caucasian populations, do you, regardless of the ethnicity of the defendant?
That's correct.
Because you have to look at all of the populations, because there isn't actually that much distinction statistically among the populations in the frequency of Y profiles.
That's correct. If you look at the percent exclusion, they're all around the same amount.
And that's what I was going to ask you about. Mm-hmm. So the frequency of the profile in the African American population is 1 in 521, but 99.8% of the population would be excluded as having that profile.
Yes.
And for the Asian population, 99.91% of the population are excluded.
Yes.
And for the Caucasian population, 99.4% of the population.
Yes, that's correct.
And finally, for the Hispanic population, 99.78% are excluded. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I have nothing further.
Okay. Any requests, Mr.
But you also gave us the statistics of 1 in 521 African American men, right?
Yes.
And 1 in 167 Caucasian men, correct?
Yes.
And you gave us the statistic for Hispanic men and for Asian men, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And those are scientifically valid.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next witness, please.
Sarah Giaquinta, convicted of detained in Washington.
Sure.
Would you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the cause now in hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God? I do. You may be seated.
Just take your seat and just face us on briefly, and you can see. Good morning, ma'am. In a motion to sequester witnesses in the case, so until all the evidence is over, you can only be in the courtroom when you testify. You can't talk about your testimony with the other witnesses or let them talk about their testimony with you. And the sequestration order for being in the courtroom has the exclusion discussed at the sidebar.
Good morning, ma'am. Can you please state your first and last names for the jury?
Sarah Giaquinta,
And can you spell your names?
Sarahgiaquinta,
Miss Giaquinta, how old are you?
31.
Are you married?
Yes.
To whom are you married?
Andrew Giaquinta?
And ma'am, do you work?
Yes.
What do you do for work?
I teach high school.
And where do you teach?
Danvers High School.
What subject do you teach?
Math.
How long have you been a math teacher at Danvers High School?
This is my 4th year at Danvers.
And had you taught somewhere before Danvers?
Yes.
Where was that?
Vercollone High School
And when did you begin at Danvers High School?
in 2012, September.
And were there a number of new math teachers that year in September of 2012?
Yes, there were 4 of us.
And who were those 4?
Colleen Ritzer, Todd Butterworth, Christopher Carlson, and myself.
And did you develop a relationship with Colleen Ritzer?
I did.
What was your relationship with her?
We became good friends and colleagues.
And how often during the school day would you see Colleen?
Quite a few times, 4 or 5, maybe more.
And if we could, where was your classroom located in October of 2013 at Danvers High School?
My classroom was in room 221.
Okay. If we could use the educational and the chalk. Do you recognize that to be Danvers High School, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay. And if we could go to the next. And then the next. Ma'am, if I tell you the blue classroom is Colleen Ritzer's classroom, and the yellow is the girls' room, can you, with the pointer in front of you, indicate where your classroom is? Or was, rather.
Right there.
Okay, so on the other hallway from Colleen Ritzer's classroom?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, under what circumstances would you, we can take that down, under what circumstances would you see Ms. Ritzer during the day?
Just check-ins, usually at the beginning of the school day to say hello. We would have lunch together, sometimes in between classes if we had a moment. Usually during a free block, if we had one together, we would spend it together.
And drawing your attention to October 22nd of 2013, were you working on that day?
Yes.
Was there anything particular about the way you dressed for work that day?
Objection.
Overruled.
Yes, it was Dress Like Your Friend Day for Spirit Week, and we dressed the same.
You dressed the same as who?
As Colleen.
And what were you wearing?
Black pants and a purplish shirt.
Okay. And were other faculty doing the same thing that day?
Yes, a lot of faculty dressed like their friends, and her freshman team also dressed in the same way.
Okay. And freshman team meaning freshman team of teachers, not freshman team of students, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, on October 22nd of 2013, when does the regular school day end, meaning the actual classes that students are required to attend?
1:55.
And did you have anywhere to go at 1:55?
Yes, I had a meeting right after school.
Okay. And about how long did that meeting last?
10, maybe 15 minutes.
When what part of the school was your meeting located in?
In the principal's office.
And when your meeting was complete, where did you go?
To Colleen's classroom.
And when you arrived at Colleen's classroom, what happened?
There were 2 students in there and we started to talk, and I asked if we could go across the hall to another room where there weren't any students, so that we could continue to talk.
Did you note at that time the gender of the two students in Colleen's classroom?
One was female and one was male.
Did you personally recognize or know those students?
No.
And where did you and Colleen go from there?
Across the hall to Todd's classroom.
Do you know about how long you spent talking in Todd's classroom?
Maybe 10 minutes.
During that part of your conversation, were you talking about your meeting?
Yes.
Okay. And at some point, did you move from Todd Butterworth's classroom?
Yes. After about 10 minutes or so, we started to head back to her classroom.
And did you continue to talk as you were heading back to her classroom?
We did.
And in fact, did you linger in the hall for any amount of time?
Yes.
At some point, did you ask her whether she needed to get back to her classroom?
Yes.
And specifically, what, if anything, did she tell you about the girl in her classroom?
Objection.
Overruled.
She said that the girl was just drawing on her board.
And did she make any specific statement about why the boy in her classroom was there?
Objection.
I'll see you at the sidebar, please.
What did Colleen say to you just about why the boy was in her classroom?
She said, I don't know why he's here.
And did you two then go on to talk about other things?
We did.
What were you talking about?
Hair shampoo, students having lice. Her sister had had lice in the past. What to use if your scalp was itchy. Just regular, everyday things that we would talk about.
And at some point, did you have any conversation with her about how you were going to get home?
I did.
Had your transportation been an issue in the time leading up to October 22nd?
Yes.
What was the problem?
My car had broken down, so I didn't have a car.
And how had you been getting to and from school or from school?
Sometimes I would take my husband's truck, and sometimes Colleen would give me a ride home.
And did you have any conversation with her regarding that situation outside the classroom?
Objection.
I overrule the objection, but provided limited instruction if you want it, Ms. Regan. And if you'd like to be heard at the sidebar, I'll hear.
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Overruled.
You can answer the question. Did you have any conversation with Colleen about that situation with your transportation?
I did. She had offered to give me a ride home if I needed one that day, and I had told her that I didn't need one.
Ma'am, at some point you've had an opportunity to review video from the school surveillance system regarding a portion of your conversation with Colleen that afternoon. Is that correct?
Yes.
And is that video a fair and accurate depiction of you and Ms. Ritzer in the hallway that afternoon?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this point I would ask to play a portion of the video.
Maybe play.
Fair to say this is when you're talking about the hair and lice, Ms.
Yes.
Giaquinta? And where is Colleen's classroom with respect to this?
Just behind her. The door is right to her left.
And Ms. Giaquinta, when you were speaking to Ms. Ritzer that afternoon, did you notice any abrasions or injuries to her face or her chin?
No.
Ms. Giaquinta, was Ms. Ritzer's demeanor the whole time you were talking to her that afternoon essentially as it is in that video?
Yes.
And when you parted ways with her, where did you go?
Back to my classroom.
Do you remember when you left the school that day?
Just after 3, maybe around 3:10.
Did you have any further contact with Colleen before leaving the school?
No.
Did you hear from her at all over the course of that afternoon?
No.
At some point, did you hear from someone regarding her?
Yes.
Who was that?
Her mom.
As a result of hearing from Peg Ritzer, what, if anything, did you do?
I told her I would go to the high school and see if Colleen's car was still there.
And did you do that?
I did.
Who did you go with?
My husband.
When you arrived at Danvers High School, do you know about what time that was?
Maybe around 9 o'clock, just before.
And when you, let me ask you this, over the course of the next couple of hours, were you at Danvers High School as various personnel arrived?
Yes.
At some point, were you shown some video of a male going into the girls' room?
Yes.
And did you recognize that male?
Not at the time.
At some point, did you see video of the male that you recognized?
Yes.
Who did you recognize that person as?
Philip Chism.
Did you recognize him as the person you had seen in Colleen's classroom that afternoon?
Yes.
I have no further questions for Ms. Giaquinta.
I have no questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Your Honor, I would move to admit the video.
Okay.
No objection.
Your Honor, at this point, I would also move to admit the entirety of the 91 videos. I believe some were taken to Benning when they first came in through Officer Baldessari, but they've now been testified to by Officer Sullivan.
Okay. Any objection?
No objection.
That may be admitted now, no longer than.
And Your Honor, while we're at it, I believe by agreement with the keeper affidavit, I'd be introducing records from J.P. Morgan Chase.
Oh, please see them.
Yes.
They already had a number, right?
The 51. The 51.
No objection.
Admitted.
Exhibit 129.
I would call Dr. Anna McDonald.
Miss, would you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the cause now in hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated.
Just have a seat. Turn and face the judge and give you some instructions.
Doctor, make yourself comfortable, please. You have a seat, make yourself comfortable. Thank you. Then a motion to sequester witnesses in the case so until all the evidence is over, you can only be in the courtroom when you're testifying. You can't talk about your testimony with the other witnesses, or let them talk about these with you. Thank you. Ms. McDougall, please.
Good morning, Dr. McDonald. Can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
I'm Dr. Anna McDonald.
Can you spell your first and last names, ma'am?
My first name is spelled A-N-N-A, and my last name is McDonald, M-C-D-O-N-A-L-D.
Dr. McDonald, how are you currently employed?
I'm employed by Wake Forest University in North Carolina. I am a forensic pathologist.
And ma'am, can you briefly describe for us your educational background?
Sure. So I went to Davidson College in North Carolina for my undergraduate. I then went on to medical school at Duke University. And then I came up to Massachusetts after completing my medical school, and I did an anatomic and clinical pathology residency at Massachusetts General Hospital. And then I proceeded to do 2 fellowships after that in order to get subspecialty training. One was in pediatric pathology at Children's Hospital, and the other was in forensic pathology at the Boston office of the Chief Medical Examiner.
And for how long were you at the Boston office of the Chief Medical Examiner?
A little over a year.
Now, Dr. McDonald, are you licensed to practice medicine?
Yes.
In what states are you licensed, or have you been licensed?
I have been licensed to practice in Massachusetts, and I now am licensed to practice in North Carolina.
And are you board certified?
Yes.
In what areas of medicine are you board certified?
Sure. I'm board certified in anatomic and clinical pathology, so what I did my residency in. And then I'm also board certified in pediatric pathology and forensic pathology.
And can you explain to the jury the distinction in those areas of pathology that the 3 areas you're board certified in?
So pathology in general is a specialty of medicine, much like pediatrics or internal medicine. And it specializes essentially in the laboratory aspects of disease. So we deal with body fluids, body tissue, and in the case of autopsies, we deal with obviously the full body. So I trained in that. That's a 4-year process. And then pediatric pathology looks at the pathology unique to the pediatric population. And then forensics then looks at injuries and diseases that we see in autopsy pathology specifically.
And Ma'am, can you describe for us what your duties and responsibilities were when you were employed by the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in Boston?
Yes. So during a fellowship, you complete approximately 200 autopsies under the supervision of a board-certified forensic pathologist. And as a part of doing the autopsy, you complete both external and internal exams on those cases, as well as look at histologic sections, little pieces of tissue under the microscope related to those cases, as well as look at other laboratory data like toxicology related to them. Ultimately generate a report called an autopsy report.
And Dr. McDonald, did you conduct the autopsy of Colleen Ritzer on October 24th of 2013?
I did.
And in your process, what is the first thing you do when you begin conducting an autopsy?
So an autopsy begins with, as I said, an external examination. It's not dissimilar to getting a physical at the physician. You go from head to toe, looking just at the outside of the body, trying to see things that are relatively normal, like hair color, things like that, as well as looking for injuries.
And in addition, in this particular case, did you take note of what clothing Ms. Ritzer was wearing when she arrived at the medical examiner's office?
I did. That's part of an external examination.
Okay. It would be fair to say she was partially clothed when she arrived?
That's correct.
May I approach this witness room? Ma'am, showing you the item in this bag, do you recognize this item?
I do, yes.
What do you recognize that item to be?
That is the long sleeve purple shirt that the decedent was wearing upon autopsy external examination.
And is this shirt in essentially the same condition it was in when you observed it on Ms. Ritzer?
It is.
And specifically with respect to, I believe, what you called a defect in the shirt, was that present when you examined it on her that day?
Yes, it was.
I'd ask this be marked as the next exhibit. Showing you a second item, do you recognize that?
I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
That was the white undershirt that was beneath the purple shirt we just saw.
And is this in essentially the same condition it was in when you observed it on Ms. Ritzer?
Yes, it is.
Was there anything of note of how those two shirts, the purple sweater and the white tank top, were arranged on Ms. Ritzer when she arrived at the ME's office?
They were both pulled above her breasts.
131.
I'm showing you one more item. Do you recognize that, Dr. McDonald?
Yes, this is the tan-colored bra on the decedent.
And was this, is this in essentially the same condition it was in when you observed it on Ms. Ritzer?
Yes.
And was there anything of note of how this was arranged on her body when she arrived at the ME's office?
The cups of the bra were pulled down to expose her breasts.
Yes.
Route 132.
Dr. McDonald, as part of your external examination, let me ask you this, at some point was the clothing removed from Ms. Ritzer so you could conduct your further examination?
Yes.
And as part of your external examination, did you take, what kinds of things are you looking to take note of in the exterior of a person?
So to begin an external examination, you essentially try to globally look at the whole body to see what state it is in. So her body was intact, and it seemed to be covered with organic debris, so leaves, pine needles, dirt.
And did you note, and let me ask you this, at some point is she then cleaned so that you can do a more thorough examination?
Yes.
And was that done in this case?
Yes.
And at that point, did you take note of any bruises, abrasions, or contusions on her body?
Yes.
What did you know?
So she had an abrasion or a skin scrape under the right side of her jaw. She had a contusion or a bruise above her left breast. And she also had a contusion or a bruise on the right upper side of her abdomen.
And with respect to her extremities, her arms and legs, did you note anything?
Yes, so there were two contusions or bruises as well on her, around her right elbow. There was one right here, sort of on the medial side of her elbow. And then there was a blue contusion also on the back of her elbow.
And are you as a doctor able to age or date bruises at all?
In the forensic community, no.
And additionally, with respect to abrasions or scrapes, are you able to date those at all?
No.
Moving to the head and face, did you take note of anything on external examination of the head and face?
So the head and face had abundant petechiae. Petechiae are small little pinpoint hemorrhages that are seen on the surface of the skin and in mucosal membranes. So I could see abundant petechiae on her face and around her eyes.
And what do they actually look like to you as you're looking at Colleen Ritzer's face?
Sure. So they look essentially like little pinpoint red dots or hemorrhages underneath the skin.
And what is the significance to you as a forensic pathologist of petechiae in those locations around the eyes and mouth?
So petechiae on a decedent, particularly in around the face, around the eyes, within the eyes, which was also present here, and within her mouth, all had these petechiae. It's a red flag to a forensic pathologist to look for evidence of asphyxia.
What is the mechanism through one gets petechiae through when being asphyxiated?
So there are different methods by which someone can be asphyxiated. The easiest way to understand is if pressure is applied to the neck. There's obviously a lot of important structures going up and down your neck. Those include arteries taking blood to your brain, veins that drain blood from your head. So we have a bunch of vessels within that area. And when you apply pressure to the neck, the veins collapse first, and it kind of creates a high pressure system whereby blood essentially ruptures out of very small capillaries or small blood vessels around the face, in the eyes, and in the mouth.
And is that what creates those pinpoint areas that you can see?
That is correct, yes.
In terms of doing a further examination for evidence of asphyxia, did you do that ultimately with respect to Ms. Ritzer?
Yes.
And what else do you look for?
Sure. So in cases of asphyxia or where you suspect asphyxia, a dedicated neck dissection is always performed. You can imagine if pressure is being put on your neck, you might get abrasions, skin scrapes, contusions or bruises around the neck area. You may also get hemorrhage into the muscles of your neck because there's a lot of muscles that are protecting our neck and allowing us to move our head around. So you're looking for hemorrhages into those muscles as well. Internally, even further, imagine if more pressure is applied, you could actually break the cartilages in your neck as well, the thyroid cartilage and the hyoid bone, all of which were looked for in this specific case.
Were there any challenges to looking for those particular findings in this particular case given other injuries?
Yes.
What was that?
The neck was obscured by a variety of sharp force injuries, so it was difficult to identify hemorrhage within the muscles as related to pressure on the neck, or was it related to the sharp force injuries?
Did you find any broken or torn or broken cartilage in the neck that you associated with asphyxiation?
No, I did not.
Is there anything about Ms. Ritzer's age and health at the time of her death that made it less likely to find injury in her neck from asphyxiation?
So younger individuals, these neck cartilages that I was describing, the thyroid cartilage and this hyoid bone, are less ossified, meaning they're less mineralized. And so they're essentially more pliable or flexible. So it's more challenging to break a more flexible cartilage than it is a bony one. So in someone this age, it would be more flexible and thus less likely to break.
Now, you referenced that there was a significant sharp force injury to the neck. Is that
Yes.
correct? Did you ultimately document how many sharp force injuries you could count on the neck area?
I did.
And how many was that?
So to the neck area, there were 12 stab wounds and 4 incised wounds.
And what's the distinction?
So when documenting sharp force injuries, you look at how long they are on the skin surface and how deep they are, among other characteristics. And so stab wounds are shorter on the surface of the skin than they are deep, so something that could be produced by a knife. Incised wounds are essentially an incision, so it is longer on the skin surface than it is deep.
And how did you go about documenting or memorializing the 16 total sharp force wounds you found to Colleen Ritzer's neck?
So by convention, I lettered them A through P.
And did you diagram them to assist you in remembering their location?
Yes.
Dr. McDonald, I placed a document in front of you. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
Who produced that document?
This is a dedicated neck diagram from the autopsy that I produced during the procedure.
And did you use that to note for yourself where each of the injuries are?
I did.
Would that assist you in explaining the injuries to the jury?
It would.
I'd ask this to be marked as the next exhibit.
No objection.
Yes.
Exhibit 133.
What is the distinction between those injuries you've marked in green and those you've marked in yellow?
So I've color-coded them on this photocopy to indicate the stab wounds versus the incised wounds for a matter of nomenclature to remember them.
Okay. And of the 16 wounds altogether, how many of them struck major structures?
So you can see here that I've circled an outline in red of A, B, C, and D, and those involved major structures within the neck.
So if we could start with those that didn't, that would be E through P. Can you describe for us what you observed or noted about injuries E through P depicted on the right side of the diagram, I believe?
Yes.
And that would be the left side of Ms. Ritzer's neck, is that
correct?
Okay.
Correct. So E, F, G, I, L, K, M, N, O, and P are all stab wounds that they obviously perforate the skin and involve the soft tissue underneath, again, but did not hit a major structure. The green H and J, those are incised wounds that again involved the soft tissue under the skin but did not hit a major structure.
And you had mentioned earlier that you sometimes dissect the neck in order to look for further injury from asphyxiation. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
And what type of an instrument do you use when you're dissecting the neck?
So a dedicated neck dissection involves essentially removing structures in layers to try to understand which structures within the neck are involved. So you'd remove the skin and the tissue right under the skin, and then you take the muscles back in certain layers before you look at the arteries and veins in the neck, as well as the trachea or the windpipe.
And as you are doing that dissection, are you able to feel a difference depending on what structures you're cutting through?
Yes.
What's the sort of distinction as you're doing a dissection of the neck in terms of difficulty or ease of making those dissections?
So skin and soft tissue essentially feel different with a knife than muscle. And beneath the muscle, you come to the trachea or the windpipe, and that's made of cartilaginous rings and those neck cartilages I was describing. So it is a more difficult structure to cut through. And finally, in the very back of the neck, you have the spine, and obviously the spine is made of bone, among other things, and so that structure is the hardest.
And fair to say that the scalpel that you use is made for this very purpose and is sharpened for this very purpose?
Yes.
Okay. Now,
Excuse me, McDougall, I think we'll take the morning recess. If I could ask you to step down, Doctor, I'll see counsel at the sidebar while the jury is leaving. Ladies and gentlemen, the jury at 11 will bring you in unless you need more time. Take the time that you need. Do not discuss the case among yourselves with anybody else during the recess. And I'll just see counsel at the sidebar for a moment.
There's an agreement because there's a portion that would be stipulated to, but the rest is really just intended to create a record for the court of the discussions that have gone on. We would, I think, only be asking that the line, the Commonwealth agrees and stipulates that this photocopy fairly and accurately depicts the actual slide taken from Ms. Ritzer, would be the only line read to the jury.
Okay.
So that would be offered as evidence for the cross-examination.
All right, but we have a stipulation with signed by...
Yes, and I can read that.
All right, and is this a stipulation as to what testimony would be, or a stipulation of fact?
It's a stipulation of fact, the fact being the authenticity of the photo of the histologic slide.
Okay, we can do that. Okay.
Yep. But we're not going to read the whole thing.
No,
Kate will do it.
I'll do it and I'll just read that.
Ms. McDougall, is this your last witness? Okay. And do required findings, and then do you have witnesses today, Ms. Reed?
No, we don't. And just for the record, while we're waiting, I believe there's going to be a stipulation as to the defendant's date of birth before I arrest.
Okay.
And then technically I think the view is part of my case, but obviously I'm not going to wait to arrest after the view, but I don't know if the court wants to address that at all. So those would be the only sort of outstanding items.
All right. I don't think there's any need to address the view. I think that's a...
I don't either. I just sort of want to...
No, I appreciate that. Okay. Ms. Regan, there's no need to address that. That's something that's requested by both sides, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. And what time's the release Wednesday? Is it noon?
11:15 to have the school clear by noon.
Jury, all right. Court is now in session. You may be seated. Any of the jurors have any difficulty following the instructions of the court not to discuss the case among yourselves with anybody else during the recess? None of the jurors answered affirmatively. If we could have the witness resume the stand, please. Yes, please, Ms. McDougall.
If we could have the projector on. Dr. McDonald, with respect to the injuries that you labeled E through P, I think you indicated that none of those injuries cut through a major structure, just through muscle and tissue. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Would those injuries, however, have caused pain?
Yes.
And you had also indicated there were 3 injuries on the right side of Ms. Ritzer's neck, which you labeled A, B, and C. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And are those depicted on the diagram that you have indicated?
Yes.
And can you describe for us injury A and what you noted about it and what you noted about its path?
So injury A and injury C are both stab wounds of the neck. So again, it's shorter on the skin surface than it is deep. So both of those stab wounds went through the skin, soft tissue, through one of the big neck muscles, and then both of them injured the right internal jugular vein, one of the big veins that drains blood out of the head.
And the internal jugular vein, what effect would that have of that being injured?
Well, if you breach the surface or the wall of the vein, obviously you would have blood loss.
With respect to the internal jugular vein, where would that blood loss, what would you expect that blood loss? Let me ask you this, is that particular vein one which is under pressure?
Well, all of the vasculature is under some level of pressure, yes.
And in terms of compared to other veins, would you expect, let me ask you this, what is arterial spray or arterial bleeding?
Sure. So arterial bleeding and venous bleeding imply bleeding from either an artery or a vein. So blood that's leaving the heart goes away in arteries. Arteries go away from the heart, and that is blood under a higher pressure system than blood that's returning to the heart. It's a relatively low pressure system. So if you breach the wall of a vein, it's considered a slower bleed than if you breach the wall of an artery, which tends to, you think about the movies, it essentially gushes blood. So that, in reference to your question, I apologize, it is the bleeding from an artery or the spraying from an arterial source that's what's labeled as arterial spray by folks who do blood stain analysis.
And in fact, this vein, the internal jugular that was damaged by cuts A and C, that is not, that is a vessel that is going back towards the heart, therefore a slower bleed because the blood is going back towards the heart.
That is correct.
Okay. And would you expect the bleeding to be initially internal or external to the body?
So that question depends on how the body is laying.
Okay.
Initially, obviously, the vein is inside the neck, so the first bleeding would be inside the neck, and then, depending on the body's position, would be able to exit the neck as well.
Okay. With respect, and let me ask you this in terms of the consequences of damage to the internal jugular vein, what are the consequences to Ms. Ritzer? What happens to her body when that vein is damaged?
So it's in effect exsanguination or extreme blood loss. That in and of itself is a lethal injury.
And
I said that in and of itself would be a lethal injury.
And with respect to injury B or wound B, can you describe for us as you did that, what observations you made of that injury?
So B is somewhat similar to A and C. B, however, is coated in green, so that's an incised wound, meaning, again, it's longer on the skin surface than it is deep. It had a similar wound track to A and C. Again, it goes through the skin, the soft tissue, then goes through one of the big neck muscles, and again, damages the wall of the internal jugular vein on her right.
So all three of those injuries damaged ultimately the same vein.
That is correct.
Mm-hmm. Now, on your diagram, there is an injury D that is depicted almost like a V. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then did you do a separate diagram of that injury in the middle of the diagram?
I did.
Can you describe for us injury D?
So D is a V-shaped defect that has, as you can see on the right-hand sketch that I drew, has these irregular edges that appear, D appears to be the confluence of multiple incised wounds that in a conglomerate generate this V-shaped defect, D.
So while you call it one wound, you believe it required multiple stabbings, is that correct?
Multiple incisions based on the wound edges being irregular and having this shape, yes.
Okay. And can you describe for us what damage you observed to Ms. Ritzer's body through wound D?
So wound D, as you can see in this image, involves the right side of her neck, it crosses the midline, and then involves the left side of her neck. So some of the blood vessels on the left were damaged. The left external jugular vein, so a smaller vein than the one I just talked about, which was the right internal jugular vein. This is a smaller vein, as well as the left carotid artery. So that's an artery which is a little bit deeper inside the neck. In addition to those two blood vessels and the skin, soft tissue, and muscle, other structures were damaged. So this wound D cuts across the thyroid gland, which sits on top of essentially your Adam's apple in your neck. The wound track proceeds then to go through her trachea from front to back. And behind the trachea or windpipe is your esophagus, or the tube going from your mouth to your stomach. That is also injured. And ultimately, the wound track, or the conglomerate wound tracks, I should say, they stop at the vertebra C6. So they eventually stop after hitting the backbone of one of the vertebrae.
And did you in fact see evidence on that vertebra of the knife made, or the blade made contact with the vertebra?
It did. The blade penetrated, but not perforated the vertebra.
And I think you already testified that the trachea is cartilage. It's somewhat tougher than skin and tissue. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what about the esophagus? What is the consistency of cutting through the esophagus?
It would be more like cutting through muscle.
Okay. So the injury that is labeled D essentially goes, at least at one point, all the way back to the back of her neck to the vertebra. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you indicated that the carotid artery is different than both the internal and external jugular vein, which were damaged, because can you describe how that would be different in terms of severing or damaging the carotid artery?
Sure. So we've talked a little bit about the pressures in arteries versus veins. So arteries have a higher pressure system. If you then breach the surface or injure the surface of your artery, blood will come out with more force than bleeding from the vein. So the carotid artery would have produced more rapid bleeding or exsanguination than a venous injury would have.
Do you have any way, Dr. McDonald, of determining the chronology of injuries to Ms. Ritzer?
No.
And would that include the asphyxiation, meaning you can't say what came first?
Correct.
Showing you a photograph, Dr. McDonald, do you recognize what that photograph depicts?
I do.
And what does that photograph depict?
This photograph depicts primarily the left side of the decedent's face, neck, and upper chest.
And does that photograph depict those portions of the neck injuries that you've described for the jury?
It best depicts the injuries on the left side of her neck, so E through P, with some proportion or some visualization of D.
And are you able in that photograph at all to see any of the petechiae that you described for us?
Because we're kind of looking at this side of her face, it's more challenging. There appear to be one or two up by her jawline, but it's not the best representation.
Okay. I would just be marked as the next exhibit.
Admitted.
134. And showing you another photograph, Dr. McDonald, do you recognize what that photograph depicts?
I do.
What does that photograph depict?
This photograph depicts an anterior view of her, essentially up under her neck, the decedent's neck and upper chest, allowing visualization of the remainder of the injuries.
And in particular, does that photograph depict the most of wound D?
Yes, it does.
I would ask this be marked as the next exhibit.
Admitted.
Exhibit 135.
Dr. McDonald, in addition to the injuries you've described already, did you have cause to examine the genital area of Ms. Ritzer?
Yes, that's routine as part of an autopsy examination.
And initially, did you do an external examination or a visual examination of the genital area?
Yes.
What, if any, observations did you make?
So there was an approximately 1 by 3/4 inch laceration or a skin tear at the vaginal introitus, which is essentially the opening of the vagina.
And can you just assist us in understanding, fair to say the term vagina is used rather loosely as opposed to how you would use it anatomically?
Sure.
Anatomically, what do you consider the vagina?
So the vagina is essentially the canal sort of between the labia minora, disappear up into the vagina. That would be the introitus. And then the vagina is then that canal before there is the cervix and then the uterus.
So when you talk about the vagina, fair to say you're talking about an internal structure?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And What were you able, I think you've said this, but you were able to visually see that injury externally, is that fair to say?
Yes, you could.
Did you do anything to do further examination of that injury?
I did. So I took a portion of tissue from that area for histologic examination. So that piece of tissue is then prepared in the form of a slide so that one could look at it under the microscope.
And did you, in fact, conduct a further examination of that portion of vaginal tissue under the microscope?
Yes.
And what, if anything, did you observe of significance to you?
So what I saw was the mucosa or the surface of the vagina, and then beneath the surface or the submucosa, beneath the mucosa, is this connective tissue, and I saw some hemorrhage within that connective tissue.
And what's the significance to you of seeing the hemorrhage in the tissue?
The significance is that there's intact red blood cells, again, within the soft connective tissue. It essentially provides evidence for what I already knew looking at the genitalia on external examination, that this injury was sustained around the time of death, either a little before, a little after, or during the dying process.
How did you characterize it in terms of, how did you characterize the timing of the injury to the vagina?
So it is considered a perimortem injury, which peri, P-E-I-R, mortem, that's a fancy term essentially for, I can't tell if it happened right before death, right after death, or during the dying process, but it happened somewhere in that interval.
And what are specifically are the findings that lead you to conclude perimortem?
Sure. So the presence of the intact red blood cells in the tissue. Some folks would surmise that the heart still had to be beating to get the blood cells into the tissue, and that would be considered an antemortem piece of evidence, I guess. This area of forensic pathology is fraught with differences in interpretation. Folks in the community, in the forensic community at least, recognize that this is a challenge, and the presence of the red blood cells means essentially that the person didn't die that long before or after the injury. It happened right at the time, but I don't see evidence of it being a remote injury.
If this injury had occurred when she was not injured in any other way, alive and well, and this injury occurred, what would you have expected to see?
An abundance of hemorrhage in the area.
And if this injury had occurred clearly post-mortem, her heart had stopped beating for some significant period of time, what would you have expected to see?
Sure. So by textbooks, you would expect to see no blood at all. Let's say we were 24 hours after death or something like that. So the blood had stopped beating from the heart a long time ago. You're kind of gathering the complexity in this issue because you could also argue that whatever implement or whatever caused the laceration or the tissue tear could have pushed the red blood cells around after death as well. So you cannot clearly distinguish that this was a postmortem wound caused by an implement well after death or if her heart was still beating, and hence where I'm essentially vacillating because it's impossible to know.
And that's why you term it a perimortem injury.
Correct, yes.
In addition to the examination you conducted of the injury, did you do evidence collection from the vaginal area of Ms. Ritzer?
Yes, this is part of the examination before any internal examination is conducted.
And did you in fact complete an evidence collection kit in this case?
I did.
Specifically with respect to the vaginal swab, from where did you take the vaginal swab?
So as part of the kit protocol, the vaginal swab are actually swabs that are inserted into the vagina. So again, that internal structure that we talked about versus the external genitalia swabs, which are conducted on the outside of the genitalia.
And with respect to the anorectal swab, from where do you take that?
So those swabs as well are inserted into the rectal area for collection.
And when you what do you do with all of the swabs?
We box them up very meticulously in a box similar to that and send it to the state lab.
And in fact, you recognize that particular evidence collection kit?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
The kit from decedent Colleen Ritzer.
And does that kit contain signatures and as well as a kit number?
It does.
And what is the kit number?
The kit number is 46405.
I'd ask this to be marked as the next exhibit.
No objection.
You need to
136. Doctor, other than the injuries you've already described, the abrasion on the chin, the contusions on the chest and belly and elbow, the sharp force injuries to the neck, and the evidence of asphyxia, did you make any other significant findings with respect to your examination and autopsy of Colleen Ritzer?
No, I did not.
And in fact, other than those injuries, did she appear to be a healthy female of the reported age of 24?
Yes, she did.
Doctor, at the conclusion of your autopsy, as well as the other examinations you did you reach a reasonable opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to the cause of her death?
I did.
What was that opinion?
So her cause of death was sharp force injuries of the neck and asphyxia by strangulation.
And why the hybrid conclusion?
Sure. So asphyxia by strangulation as well as the sharp force injuries are both lethal in their own right and separately. I couldn't be certain, again, we talked about the sequence with which injuries occur. I couldn't be certain whether the asphyxia occurred and then the decedent lived through that episode. Therefore, I combined them as essentially a hybrid cause of death.
But although the asphyxia ultimately would be lethal, she could have lived through that episode and still been alive if the sharp force injuries were inflicted afterwards.
That is correct.
And fair to say you are presuming that the asphyxia came first because of the damage to the neck and the difficulty in inflicting asphyxia on the neck in its condition?
One could draw that conclusion about chronology, yes.
But you have no medical information that gives you an understanding of the chronology of these
That is correct.
injuries, is that correct? Mm-hmm. And with respect to the lethal injuries, do you have any medical information to tell you whether they happened all at once or whether they happened over a period of time?
That's not something that an autopsy can answer. Only on TV would they essentially do that for you.
Okay, thank you. If I could just have one moment, Your Honor. I have nothing further to Dr. McDonald.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. So, you can't tell if she was killed by the asphyxia or by the stab wounds, right?
That is correct. A combination of both lethal injuries are present.
And you don't know whether she was asphyxiated but survived and revived and was then stabbed.
That's a
correct?
Possibility, correct?
Or whether this knife attack was post-mortem.
Whether what? I'm sorry?
Whether the knife attack was after she was asphyxiated and killed.
Correct.
But the evidence you have of the asphyxia is the petechiae, correct?
That is correct.
All right, and one thing you do know is that she didn't get those petechiae after she was stabbed, after she was cut.
That is one interpretation.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, the petechiae are a result of little capillaries sort of bursting because of the pressure in the head, correct?
Correct, that's true.
And the pressure in the head builds up because there's blood flowing up through the carotid artery.
Yep.
And the blood coming down through the jugulars is cut off so it can't escape, and the pressure builds in the head, correct?
Correct.
And that's how you get petechiae.
That is true.
All right, and she has a lot of petechiae.
She does.
All right, enough to indicate that she could have been asphyxiated to death. Could have been.
Yes, could have been.
Once the jugular is severed, that pressure is released, correct?
Presuming there's no pressure being applied to the neck simultaneously, correct?
And by the way, you say that this little group of injuries on the left side,
E through P?
the two stab wounds and the one
That would be on the right side of her neck.
on the right side of her neck. You say that each one of those penetrated the one of her jugular veins, correct?
So 2 of them actually perforated the jugular vein,
Yeah.
and then 1 penetrated. So penetrated means you enter the jugular, but you don't go through the wall on the other side. So yes, there were 3 separate and distinct injuries to that jugular
So
vein.
the one that perforates actually severed that vein. Is that correct?
It poked, or it essentially poked a hole from front to back, yes.
So, so that would go a long way to release the pressure building up from blood building up in the head, correct?
Yes, it would allow for exsanguination.
All right. And then you said that that large sort of confluence of incise injuries,
Wound D.
wound D, actually severed her right carotid artery, correct?
Her left carotid
Her
artery.
left carotid artery. And right and left is from the point of view of the body of the person, not looking at it.
Correct, yes, that's why it's confusing.
All right. And a jugular on that side.
An external jugular, so a smaller vein, yes.
Okay. So those 2 vessels were actually severed, is that correct?
Let me refer to my notes
Yes,
just to be
please.
sure. I believe they're both perforated or severed, as you said.
Right.
That is correct, yes. So they are both perforated.
So not only is the pressure relieved by basically unblocking the egress,
Correct.
but in fact one of the 2 sources of ingress of blood to the head is also cut off by the carotid being severed.
So exsanguination is occurring via all 3 vessels, yes.
Okay. Good. And I think you also mentioned that the damage to the jugular vein would itself be lethal.
Are you referencing the right internal jugular vein?
Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
All right.
Breaching any large vessel would obviously result in
So all
exsanguination.
by itself, that could have been a fatal injury.
Correct.
All right. How long would it take for the person to bleed out and die with just that one injury?
From injury to, again, to the right internal jugular
Yeah.
vein? Greater than minutes.
How many minutes?
I cannot say with a
Give
reasonable
us
degree
a
of medical
ballpark
certainty.
figure.
Sustained, but you can inquire whether or not the doctor's able to indicate a time frame within a reasonable degree of medical certainty.
All right, so the judge put the question. Can you indicate any time frame how long it would take for death to follow that injury?
So again, I'm going to stand by the answer of minutes. We're not in seconds, but we're not in hours. So we're somewhere
Okay.
10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, somewhere in the ballpark of minutes.
All right. How about 40 minutes?
It is a possibility.
All right. A far out possibility.
Correct, a far out possibility, but a possibility.
All right. In the ordinary course, what would you expect to see?
I'll sustain the objection in that form, but as to the level of possibility at 40 minutes, I'll allow errors in inquiry. I'll sustain the objection as asked.
All right. So then looking at the injuries on the left side in that large injury D, the left external jugular, was that perforated or was that?
It was perforated, yes, front
So
to
that's
back.
severed.
Mm-hmm,
Okay.
severed.
And the left carotid
Correct.
was severed, correct? And either one of those injuries all by itself could be fatal.
That is true.
And I'll ask you the same question about the severance of the external jugular and left carotid. How long would it take for the person to bleed out and die?
We're in the same ballpark of minutes.
And the pressure going up in the carotid is greater, correct, than the pressure coming down in the jugular.
That is correct.
All right. And in fact, the carotid is getting blood more or less directly from the heart. It goes from the aorta to the carotid, correct?
Correct.
All right. How many liters per minute gets pumped out of the heart?
I do not know the answer to that question.
Fair amount of what gets pumped out of the heart goes directly to the head, correct?
A portion of it does, correct.
So would you expect the severance of all three of those vessels to result in nearly immediate death? All three of them?
Yes, they are all a lethal injury leading to exsanguination.
Right, and with all three of them being severed, the exsanguination, the bleeding out, is going to take place faster, correct?
That is true,
because
yes.
it's going to be bleeding from three vessels, including one
You're
of
losing
which
more
is
blood
the
more
carotid,
rapidly.
coming directly from the
Wait
heart.
a minute, I'm sorry. We crossed over each other there.
Sorry.
Go ahead, why don't you go back, please, Mr. Osler. We
All right, so-
crossed over the question and the answer.
So the severance of all three of those vessels would accelerate the death,
That is true. You would exsanguinate more quickly.
right? More quickly than you would with just one of them.
True. We've damaged 3 vessels instead of 1.
And how much bleeding would you expect to see from those injuries?
Within the body tissue or in the scene?
Or how much would you expect to see bleeding out? Would you expect to see a lot of blood from an injury like that?
Yes. Quantifying I'm not able to do.
All right. But the person would be bleeding profusely.
3 vessels being severed, I would agree.
And with 3 vessels being severed, fair to say the bleeding out process would go roughly 3 times as fast?
Having not done any computational analysis, I'm not sure.
So all you're sure of is it certainly would go faster than just one vessel,
Yes.
but whether it would be in direct proportion to the number of severed vessels, you're not sure.
Whether it would be tripled or essentially divided by 3 is not something that I know.
Okay. But it would be significantly faster.
It would be more quickly.
Okay. And not only would the person die, but they would also lose consciousness early in that process, correct?
That is true as part of the dying process. If blood is coming out of the brain at some point, there's not enough oxygen and you do lose consciousness.
So they'd lose consciousness even faster than they would die.
It's my understanding that you lose consciousness before you die, yes.
Okay.
In the process of exsanguination.
Okay. So then the bleeding, once the heart stops, does the bleeding stop?
Which bleeding are you referencing?
When the bleeding out from the 3 severed vessels in the neck, when that results in the heart stopping, when the person dies, then the bleeding stops, correct?
So when you remove essentially the engine of the body or the heart from creating a pressure-based system, all the pressure equalizes, so there is no blood moving in your vessels. But that is not necessarily what you see as bleeding at a scene when bodies are moved around, etc.
Well, that's what I'm going to ask you. So even though the heart stops, there's still blood in the body.
Yes, correct.
It doesn't pump out 100% of the blood before death.
That is true.
Right? And the blood that's in the body, some might so there might be some more bleeding from moving the body?
Correct.
From applying pressure to the body?
Yes, I suppose. Anything that would generate pressure or allow blood to escape.
For example, laying on top of the body?
Yes.
Okay. That would push some more blood out.
Yes.
Now, I think you said you determined that the asphyxia was caused by strangulation, correct?
Correct.
And that that the evidence you had of that was the petechiae.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Right. Petechiae would be consistent with asphyxia by compression also, am I correct?
That is true, correct.
So someone sitting or kneeling on the torso or chest of the person could asphyxiate them.
That is correct.
Right.
You get petechiae in a slightly different distribution, but they are in fact present in chest compression as well, as you indicated.
And the petechiae might have a little broader distribution if it was a compression asphyxiation, correct?
Correct.
They wouldn't just be limited up around the eyes.
Correct. Petechiae, if the chest is compressed, they involve from that point of compression upward, so you see petechiae in the upper chest, on the neck, and up into the head.
And you looked for signs of strangulation, correct?
Always, yes.
All right. You looked for ligature marks?
Yes.
Didn't find any?
Correct.
No, those would be external marks that you would see around the neck area, correct?
Correct.
You looked to see if there was any hemorrhage in the neck muscles that wasn't accounted for by the cutting.
Which was not possible due to the sharp force
Because of the cutting,
injuries.
so you just don't know.
You can't tell, correct.
All right. And you looked to see whether there was any fracture of the hyoid bone.
Correct.
And there wasn't.
Correct.
Okay. You did note some contusions, I think, on the chest and abdominal area.
Yes.
Might those be consistent with someone kneeling or sitting on the chest?
That is one possibility. All I know is that a blunt object made some sort of impact with above her left breast and on her right abdomen.
So the strangulation in this case, and certainly if there was a strangulation by compression, there would be petechiae, as we just said.
As we said, mm-hmm.
So the evidence you had was pretty much equally consistent with compression or strangulation?
So the evidence against compression was the distribution of the petechiae?
Not broad enough?
Correct.
That's kind of a fuzzy criteria. There's not a hard line in that.
That's true.
Okay, kind of a judgment call.
It is.
All right. Certainly the petechiae in this case weren't concentrated all up around the person's eyes.
So the petechiae involved her whole face,
Yeah.
around her eyes, in her eyes, and in her mouth?
And in her mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You identified the clothing items that the victim had.
I did.
When she was brought into the autopsy. I want you to just take a look at this photograph. Oh, yeah, approach it this way.
You may.
Just have a look at that.
Yes, sir.
You recognize what that is?
I do.
Could you just tell the jury what it is?
So this is a photograph of the evidence that's being displayed as far as her clothing and personal effects. So I see that purple shirt that we reviewed, the white tank top, and that tan colored bra.
And those are items that were photographed at the medical examiner's office after the autopsy?
After they were removed, yes.
Is that a fair and accurate representation of those items as they appeared that night?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to move to admit this.
No objection.
Admitted.
It's about 137.
So looking first at that purple shirt, fair to say that the blood all seems to be mostly the great majority of the blood seems to be concentrated in the back of it rather than the front.
So I'm interpreting that reddish-brown stain that we're seeing up there as blood, and did so at the autopsy. And yes, most of the reddish-brown staining appears posterior or on the back of her torso, part of her shirt, and her arms.
Okay. And same thing for that undershirt.
Mm-hmm. Same.
The blood is all run down the back of it.
The blood appears to be on the back of the shirt,
Just
correct?
a few splotches and drips on the front. Correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
So almost all the blood is soaked into the back of those two garments.
Correct, that's my assessment as well.
And certainly when an individual suffers the kind of laceration, confluence of lacerations that you described in
The incised wounds of D?
that incised wound, that D-shaped thing, there's a lot of bleeding that would come right out of the body, correct?
Yes.
It wouldn't be sort of internal, and you'd be waiting a long while to see when it was going to come out. It would bleed right away.
That depends on the position of the body at the time those wounds were inflicted.
But there's a lot, those wounds sever an artery that has a lot of pressure in it, right?
Mm-hmm. Has more so than the vein.
And a jugular vein, which is not
Insignificant, correct.
Okay. So would you say that the fact that the blood from this injury is all back around the victim's back, is that consistent with the picture in which the victim is lying on the ground when she's attacked with a knife?
So that is one interpretation. It's fraught with, and I say interpretation because the distribution of blood would depend on again, as I said, the position of the decedent at the time the wounds were inflicted. I don't know whether that blood got there after the body was moved or if that blood initially was there as part of, while the heart was still beating, as part of the injury.
Right. Well, let's put it this way. If she was standing up when she sustained that injury D, right, you'd see blood on the front of her, wouldn't you?
Correct, but if she was laying anteriorly, you wouldn't necessarily.
When you say anteriorly, you mean...
If you were laying on, she was laying on her stomach. So I'm not sure, I can't tell whether she sustained the injuries, whether she's anterior and bleeding this way or whether she's posterior and bleeding down her shirt. That's subject to interpretation.
Every incise wound, or every stab wound at least, that you identified was on the front of her neck and it's front to back, correct?
Yes.
All right. And so that would be consistent with her either standing up or lying on her back.
That is consistent with the implement going from anterior to posterior or front to back. The position of the decedent is not something I'm able to tell by autopsy.
Right. So you're not confident that would you think she might have been lying on her stomach when these wounds were?
Sustained based on the last answer.
Okay. And the injuries that you identified on her neck, they're all concentrated on the neck, under the chin, correct? Sort of
that is true.
Between the chin and the collarbone, correct? And the three on the right side, A, B, and C, they're maybe a half an inch apart, correct? Within a small area.
They're within a small area.
And
this is not, however, drawn to scale. Correct. I'd have to reference my numbers.
But you also, in your report, you locate them by reference to the distance to the distance down from the top of the head, correct?
Correct.
As well as the distance from the midline. All right. And it's fair to say that A and C are, in fact, within a half an inch of each other from the distance from the head.
That is correct.
All right. And all three of them are at the same angle. They're all horizontal, correct?
So A and C are both horizontal.
Yeah. And so is B, correct?
Excuse me while I look at my notes. That is correct. Those all three are horizontally oriented.
So you've got these three knife wounds that are concentrated in a small area and that they're parallel, correct?
They're all horizontal, correct, yes.
Right. Okay. And then that larger cluster of knife wounds on the left side, they're pretty closely clustered together also, not as closely as the right side.
The neck being a small structure overall, it does appear they're tightly clustered, yes.
Yeah,
They're
very
all on the
close-
front of the
they're
neck
very
on the
close
left
together,
side.
And except for those ones on the far right, they're also parallel.
They're all at different angles if we think back to the photo that was displayed to the jury. So some are horizontally seen and some are oblique, meaning they're kind of at an angle. So they are not all parallel by definition.
Well, you would agree that E, F, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, and P are all oblique rising to the right, oblique with the anterior part at the right, correct?
You'll have to repeat the letters. I have to reference my
Yeah.
notes to know the exact angle of the wounding.
E, F,
Yes.
H, I. Am I going too fast?
Nope.
Okay, J,
Just referencing different parts of my chart. Yes.
K, L, M, N, O, and P.
They are all obliquely oriented, yes.
Okay.
Meaning
And
they're at an
close-
angle.
They're close together and they're roughly parallel. Would that be fair to say, roughly parallel?
Roughly, they're all at an angle.
All right. So this is consistent with an attack on a victim who's not moving, at least in relation to the assailant.
Now,
Correct?
Hold on. You'll have to put that into a form of whether or not she's able to indicate that to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, or you can frame it as not inconsistent.
So if the victim in this case was immobile, was not moving, for whatever reason, and the individual inflicted these wounds all at once, sort of a frenzied attack, right? These closely clustered, basically lined up parallel injuries would be consistent with that scenario, that the individual, that the victim is not moving.
That is one possibility, yes.
Okay, that would be consistent,
It's not inconsistent with that.
not inconsistent. Okay, good. And if the victim was lying on her back, well, let me put it this way. If the blood was all going to the back of the victim in her clothing, that would not be inconsistent with the victim lying on her back when she was not moving. And being
Correct, that
steady,
is one
correct?
interpretation, yes.
And the asphyxiation that you're talking about, the petechiae, that asphyxiation could have resulted in her being, well, one, it could have killed her, correct?
Correct.
Two, it could have rendered her unconscious,
That is true.
correct? Before this stabbing took place, correct?
One possibility.
Or it could have left her semi-conscious, unable to move, correct? All right. I think one of the things you did in the autopsy is you took some fingernail scrapings, is that right?
So the fingernails as part of a homicide investigation are actually clipped and sent off to the crime laboratory.
What's the purpose of that, Doctor?
That's to allow for any DNA testing that is to be performed on the fingernails.
So what would you learn from that?
So I'm not a DNA specialist, but that would give you information as to who the individual came in contact with.
All right. And and if it gives you information as to who the individual came in contact with, it gives you information that she came in contact, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, you would learn whether there was some resistance or scratching or something like that.
Objection.
Sustained as to this, that question is sustained as to this particular witness, beyond the qualifications on this foundation.
Well, you're trained to do a medical legal death investigation, correct?
Correct.
All right. And you have a lot of training.
Correct.
You have a medical degree, you have a year or more of postgraduate work in a medical examiner's office, correct?
Correct.
All right. And you understand that the work you do fits into a larger picture of figuring out what happened in these incidents.
Of course, it's a team effort. The medical legal death investigation involves a lot of parties.
Right. So, is it your understanding that the fingernail scrapings that you take in these homicide cases, that one of the things that may be learned for the purposes of the medical legal death investigation is whether there was some scratching or some? Is that your understanding of what you're doing?
I'll sustain the objection. You can ask why during autopsy the scrapings are done from the fingernails. I'll sustain the objection.
Okay. So I think in response to the question why the scrapings are done, that you said for identification purposes, correct?
They are done to be sent to my DNA criminalistic colleagues who then decide what further testing is done on them. That is not my area of expertise.
All right. So you don't, all right. When you were examining the body, at any point did you examine it? Did you have a means of examining it to determine whether there was seminal fluid on the body other than the swabs you took for the rape kit?
That is not a part of our investigation.
Right. You don't have access to an alternate light source?
We do not use it routinely at the office, no.
You don't? You have
We defer
it,
that
to,
again, to the folks who do that kind of investigation
Pardon me?
routine. We defer that to the folks who do the investigation both on scene and those who do DNA evidence.
All right. But those folks don't have the body to examine, right?
My colleagues on scene would before the body is removed by the medical examiner's office.
Okay. So, about what time of the day did you commence doing the autopsy?
I'll reference my notes for that question. I can look at my diagrams and see. So we begin cases after a morning meeting, which is roughly 10 a.m. And it looks like I concluded approximately 3 p.m. is when I finalized these sheets.
Okay. And who was present when you did the autopsy?
I would need to look at the personnel log to know which troopers were there.
Well, there were troopers.
So troopers were there,
right.
As well as an autopsy technician. The other board-certified forensic pathologists were also there as well.
Right. And did the troopers or anybody else give you any information about what had been learned about the crime scene or anything like that?
I had been to the crime scene the day before.
All right. And which crime scenes did you visit?
I had access to both the bathroom crime scene as well as the woods.
Okay. Did you have any information from the school video surveillance about the times that people did anything? Did you have any of that information?
Sure.
So did you view the school video surveillance when you visited the scene?
No.
All right. And were you given a list of the times that the victim and the defendant were seen in various places?
I received a Word document printed out that did show times from various cameras.
Okay. All right. So let me ask you, assume, as you found, there's a perforation of the right internal jugular, the left internal jugular,
The left external jugular?
the left external jugular, and the carotid, one carotid artery. Okay? And assume further that these injuries are inflicted sometime between 2:55 and 3:07 p.m. on the day. Okay?
A 12-minute interval you're describing?
A 12-minute interval.
Okay.
Ending at 3:07 p.m. And assume further that the laceration of the vaginal introitus that you observed on autopsy was caused by the insertion of a tree branch in the genital opening, and that happened no earlier than 3:37 p.m., a half hour after the end of the first time period.
Okay.
Do you have an opinion as to whether the victim would be alive or dead when the branch was inserted?
So you're describing a 30-minute interval
A
after
30-minute interval after the
neck injuries are
damage is done to
sustained?
the neck.
Repeat the question, I'm sorry.
Okay. So assume the three injuries to the vessels that you noted, the
Yes.
two jugular injuries and the severance of the carotid, and assume that those injuries were inflicted no later than 3:07 p.m.
Okay.
Somewhere between
Sure.
in that 12-minute interval before that. Okay. And then further assume that the laceration that you observed, the genital injury, was caused by the insertion of the tree branch that they have in evidence. And that happened at least a half hour later, no earlier than 3:37 p.m. Do you have an opinion as to whether the victim would be alive or dead when that laceration occurred, when the tree branch was inserted?
I have the opinion that the decedent would be incapacitated and certainly not conscious at that juncture after bleeding from those three vessels.
But your opinion is that with those three arteries severed, at least a half hour earlier, she could still be alive?
Unlikely, but we said the 40-minute time interval earlier as the far edge of possibility, so I'm being consistent with the prior assumption or interpretation.
But maybe I misunderstood you. I thought you said the 40-minute time interval applied to one vessel severed, not all three.
I'd have to refer back to the earlier transcript, but that would make sense as well.
All right. So, I mean, the time interval would be less if you could sever all three.
Would it be 30 minutes, 10 minutes? I'm not sure.
And this woman sustained other injuries, right? Her esophagus and her trachea are completely severed.
Correct.
But your opinion is she might be alive?
If it was just the severance of those three vessels, it's the remote edge of possibility.
The remote
However, as you said, other structures were injured, her windpipe and her esophagus.
Which would presumably hasten her death as well.
Correct.
Correct?
Correct.
And but that still doesn't bring it out of the range of this far out possibility that you're talking about?
I think it certainly puts us in the position where she's more likely dead at that time than alive.
I mean, the strongest inference is that she's dead. Correct?
Hold on. As to the last question, I'll have to see counsel at the side then. of inquiry.
So I'm considering that same set of assumptions, correct? And the other injuries to the neck area, the trachea and the esophagus.
Okay.
Are you able to conclude to a reasonable degree of medical certainty that the victim was still alive?
When the
When
tree
the
branch was
laceration of
inserted?
Hold on, wait a minute. Go ahead. Finish the question.
When the laceration of the genital area occurred?
So making the assumption that all the neck injuries happened around the same time, and then 30 minutes later,
At least 30 minutes.
at least 30 minutes later, a tree branch caused a laceration at the vaginal introitus.
Right.
I think it's reasonable to assume that the decedent may have already been dead at that point.
And I think you said that the interpretation of the histological slide is kind of controversial.
Absolutely.
The nature of it. So it'd be fair to say that when you looked at it, you weren't prepared to say that her heart was beating like a normal living person's, correct?
That is correct.
But that one possible explanation of this little hemorrhage that was in there would be that there was some blood pressure left.
That is one interpretation.
Right. And then I think you said on direct, there are other interpretations, right? And one of those interpretations is that the tissue itself could be subject to pressure and manipulation by the stick going in, correct?
That is correct.
And that could force some red blood cells out of those vessels that it tore. Correct?
Absolutely. That's why I classified the injury as peri-mortem, because I cannot be sure.
I'm going to ask you to, I can approach again, just take a look at it. And we have a stipulation as to what this is.
Sure. Mr. Hugo, did you wish to read the stipulation?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have in mind, again, I told you about 4 types of evidence: testimony of witnesses, exhibits, judicial notice, and stipulations. We have a stipulation of fact that the prosecutor will read.
Commonwealth of Reason stipulates, as well as the defense, that this photocopy fairly and accurately depicts the actual slide taken from Ms. Ritzer, specifically the histological slide of the vaginal tissue.
So, have you had a chance to look at that photograph that we just described?
I did.
Can I have it back? I need to ask you to look at
Sure.
it closely. All right. Presumably you examined this slide under a microscope, right?
Yes.
Okay. And find it here somewhere. So you put the slide into the scope, correct?
Yes.
And the first thing you do maybe is scan the whole thing to get an overview of what it is, correct?
You begin on low power and
You begin
go to
on
higher
low
power.
power. And then when you locate a point of interest, you increase the power of the scope.
Meaning you look at it at greater magnification to sort of
greater
blow up the image, yes.
And it's in that point of interest that you saw these intact red blood cells that you talked about, correct?
I confirmed them on higher power, yes.
Okay. Looking at that slide, can you tell us where the point of interest was? I know you can't see the blood cells, but can you tell us where the point of interest was?
So in order to locate the intact red blood cells, I'd need to look at it under a microscope. I'm looking at just an image of a slide.
You see on that slide a small little red spot, small little hemorrhage.
So I see an abundance of pink. Again, I would need to look at it under the microscope. I cannot tell from this piece of paper specifically.
I'm going to just move to admit the slide that we stipulated for the authenticity.
Exhibit 138.
have a moment, Judge.
Sure.
And if I understood your testimony on direct, if the death had occurred before the laceration, before the genital injury, there could still be intact red blood cells there, correct?
Absolutely.
And once the person was dead, there wouldn't be circulation of white cells to start a healing process, correct?
That is true.
All right. So the clock sort of stops with the death.
As far as circulation of red blood cells and white blood cells by the heart, yes.
All right. And certainly if the death occurred within 30 or 40 minutes earlier, the red cells would still be intact.
Yes, that is a possibility, yep.
Okay, that's it. Thanks very much.
Mr. Kizzel?
Dr. McDonald, when you examined the genital area, you indicated you visualized the laceration, is that correct?
Externally, yes, I did.
Did you see evidence of bleeding from that laceration? On a visual examination, not from the histological examination?
So, if I understand the question correctly, you're asking if I saw red-brown substance in the area?
Correct.
There was abundant leaf debris and dirt, and I was unable to visualize what would presumably be blood. It was obscured.
If death had occurred 30 to 40 minutes before the penetration of the genital opening, would you have expected active bleeding onto the object that penetrated it?
So if the stick had been inserted 30 minutes after the heart stopped beating,
Correct.
there would potentially be blood on the stick as well as if she had still been alive. So I'm unable to make that determination based on autopsy. You cannot tell.
And you couldn't visualize any red-brown stains, but you've indicated there was a fair amount of debris. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And in fact, I believe you testified on direct, there was debris all over her body.
Yes.
You were asked some questions about the fingernail scrapings or clippings that you
I do
took.
clippings, yes.
Did you have an opportunity to make observations with your naked eye of the condition of her hands and fingernails?
So her hands in general, they had bags over them, which I removed. And on her hands, both her right and left hand, they had this organic debris we're talking about. They had abundant leaves, pine needles, dirt, mostly dirt, and there was reddish-brown substance on both of her hands as well.
And what was the condition? Did you notice anything else caught in her hands or her fingernails?
So her fingernails were all well-groomed in short condition. I noted in her left hand, sort of between her fingers, there were two long brown hairs that I collected as part of evidence.
And fair to say, you can't say whose hair it was, but the length and color was consistent with her own head hair, is that correct?
It would have been.
And what was the condition of her head hair? I mean, did you notice anything about the debris or other biological in her hair?
Her hair had this abundant organic debris as well, sort of all throughout.
And was there what appeared to be a red-brown substance in her hair as well?
There appeared to be caked red-brown substance, yes.
Okay. In your experience, Dr. McDonald, is it uncommon for deceased victims to have their own hair in their hands?
In the case of homicides, it's not uncommon to see women in particular get a hair caught in their hands.
Now, you were asked, let me ask you about the histological slide that you were just shown. When you create a histological slide, do you do so you can examine it with your naked eye?
No, the purpose is for microscopic examination.
Would you ever, even if that were the actual slide and not a color copy, would you ever make any determinations just from looking the slide itself without a microscope?
No, the purpose is for the microscope. I've already done the examination with my naked eye at autopsy.
Now, if, with respect to the sequence of events, you were asked a number of questions about ABC and then EFG, HIJ. Should probably try and do this just the regular way, but ABC and then EFG, HIJ, KLMNOP.
Yes.
And those are sort of the two clusters of sharp wounds on either side of injury D.
Yes.
If, and you talked about the effect it would have on the speed of exsanguination if all three of the, or all four, I guess, of the injuries that had significant wound paths were inflicted around the same time. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
If, and you had talked about, I believe on direct, that the carotid artery, which was severed in wound D, would have bled at a higher pressure than the internal or external jugular veins.
Correct.
If the internal and external jugular veins had been severed sometime before, would that affect the degree of pressure at which the carotid, so say she had already been stabbed and injured both the jugulars sometime before and was essentially in the process of dying, would that impact the pressure of the blood in the carotid?
So if you've essentially traumatized or cut through two veins, you've removed blood from the system, so you have sort of a fixed pressure system. And if you remove some of the blood from it, the heart has less blood from which to generate high pressures, so it'd be a lower pressure system if you then broached the carotid, meaning you may get a slower bleeding process if the carotid was injured after the veins.
And to the extent, I'm afraid, I think you may have used the term sort of like you see in the movie gushing, you wouldn't have had that same effect of cutting the carotid that you would expect if the carotid was cut prior to any other significant injury.
Correct.
And if the carotid was cut while the heart was still beating at healthy beating, would you expect blood to come out of the artery when it was cut? Meaning not just bleed, but actually have some amount of arterial spray.
So the visualization of arterial spray is something you see in the movies essentially by blood-stained experts on scene. Seeing the arterial spray, you frequently see it on the walls on CSI, is something that demands that nothing is obstructing the wound, so there's no clothing, and the position of the decedent. So if you're standing up, blood exits the carotid differently than if you're laying down, for example. So I only introduce that there's variation in how you see arterial spray based on
positioning
and clothing, etc. So there's a variety of variables.
Okay. And I believe you've said that the potential consequences immediately of the asphyxiation would be she could have died, but she also could have been conscious or semi-conscious.
That is correct.
And semi-conscious or conscious, she would still be potentially lying prone on the ground, either face up or face down.
Yes.
I have nothing further to offer.
Mr. Osler, any request?
If she was standing up, she'd have blood on the front of her, correct? When the neck injuries were inflicted.
True. If she's standing up and nothing again is obstructing the wound, yes.
And if she was lying face down and bleeding from those injuries, she'd have blood on the front of her.
Dependent on the body or the decedent's position when the injury is inflicted, yes.
And the injuries to her neck are the only injuries that you observed that could produce a volume of blood, correct? She didn't have any other injuries that could have caused a lot of bleeding.
Correct.
Okay.
Anything, Ms. McDowell?
No,
All right, thank you, Doctor. Ms. McDougall, there's another stipulation.
There is, Your Honor, the parties stipulate that Philip Chism's date of birth was January 21st of 1999.
Okay. And with that?
The Commonwealth rests.
Okay.
I have one matter to publish the jury.
Sure.
Oh.
This is the one I gave you
Yep.
back.
You're back.
Is that Morgan's? Yeah.
Oh, can I just show his own legislative action too? Just legislative action.
Oh, he wants to publish.
That's the one that he wants to publish.
I would just ask the public.
Yeah, why don't I give a curative instruction before we begin. Sometimes evidence such as a photograph is presented that produces an emotional response in jurors. For example, it's natural and even understandable that you would find sympathy and empathy when you see or hear about a person who has been injured in some serious way or suffered in some way. But as jurors, you've taken an oath under the law, and I have instructed you that the law says that you must separate any emotional reaction on your part from the informational value or weight of the evidence. You are not to be influenced in any way by the unpleasant nature of the photographs. You must find the facts of this case based solely on the evidence. Evidence that a person has suffered harm or a condition that may be difficult to look at or that depicts the alleged victim's medical condition may be relevant for a variety of reasons, including the nature and extent of the alleged victim's injuries. But you can't base facts or your decision on anger, passion, or prejudice or pity for or against either side. Rather, your verdict must be based solely on the evidence and the law as the court instructs you. You can pass that along. And I remind you all, you'll have all the exhibits with you in the jury room when you deliberate. Yeah, let me talk to him. While the exhibit is being published, why don't we just talk about scheduling for one moment before the jury leaves? Ladies and gentlemen, before you leave for the day, I know that some of you are undoubtedly concerned about weather issues, and Wednesday, as far as the view is concerned, we will be going through the school and also through the woods on Wednesday, and I'll talk to you more tomorrow about appropriate way to dress for that. It has to be Wednesday, however. What I want to make sure that you understand, the Commonwealth has rested the case. We'll start the defendant's case tomorrow morning. You've all been serious jurors, conscientious jurors, and I know that you've been working very hard. Keep in mind the instructions of the court every time I give them to you, not to discuss the case among yourselves or with anybody else. Don't do any independent research concerning this case. Avoid any information from any source other than when in the courtroom. Jurors are excused until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
All right. Justice of the Superior Court, now sitting at Salem within and for this county of Essex at present, depart and give your attendance at this place Tuesday morning next at 9 a.m., to which time and place the sitting of this court is now adjourned. Ms. Giaquinta, juror number 9. And watch your stuff going up, please.
Could you ask Nina to come in?
You may be seated.
All right, Ms. McDougall and Ms. Regan will address the required finding motion. Do you have a written motion?
Yes.
Okay.
And Mr. Osler will present this.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Osler, I'll hear you on it, please.
So the defendant has moved for a required finding on all counts of this. Offered some argument in two respects. One, the indictment for robbery identifies as the subjects of the robbery the credit cards and the underpants of the victim. And as to the credit cards, I think it's clear on the evidence that the only way he could have gotten them was by going into the classroom afterwards. I said in my memorandum how long it was. I think it was 5 minutes or 8 minutes or something. And that they must have been among her belongings that when he carried out both her school bag and her lunch bag.
Well,
so I would suggest that...
There's a suggestion in any case, though, because it's clear if the injury takes place first, and then the property is stolen, but it's all part of what's called in the case law from the court one transaction or occurrence, that's no different than if the injury takes place afterwards.
I don't think so. I think it has to be taken from her presence or her protection. And there's certainly some intervening events. He travels here and there to school, and he goes into the classroom. So I would submit that it is not taken from her person or protection, that item on the indictment should be struck.
Okay, we'll take them. I'll hear from you on all the issues, and then I'll hear from Ms. McDougall.
And then the other issue is the one that we discussed before, and it was an issue just now. For the required finding, there needs to be evidence, on all of the evidence, considered favorably to the Commonwealth, but on all of it, it needs to be sufficient to permit a rational trier of fact to conclude beyond a reasonable doubt all the elements of the crime. And what's at issue here is whether the victim was even alive when the unnatural rape charge occurred. And I would suggest that although the government's medical examiner has suggested that it was a far-out possibility, she's also said that pretty much the victim must have been dead upon suffering those injuries. We know from the evidence that there's only one place where there's a lot of blood. Unclear whether the medical examiner is aware of that, but that's in the bathroom. There's very little blood in the barrel, very little. and there's almost none out in the wooded area, including under the body. Just a very little bit. So I think that the inference is inescapable that she was killed in the bathroom. She didn't suffer any other kinds of injuries that could have produced that kind of bleeding, and she wouldn't have had that much blood left after the neck injuries. So I think the basic principle is that when there's even an equally probable inference that conflicts with the government's inference for the required finding, that defeats proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And the inference that she was dead in the bathroom is a lot more than equally probable.
No,
it's overwhelming.
I can't remember if it was Tarver or Waters, but in one of the cases, I think it was Tarver talking about the continuous transaction or episode. The medical examiner did testify, I believe, that to a reasonable degree of medical certainty that the alleged victim was dead. Now, this is different than the situation that's talked about in a lot of these cases where, because we have an issue of a different time and a different place. But I believe that in Massachusetts with the continuing episode, there's a recognition that if the death follows the rape or the rape follows the death and they're in such close proximity that it falls within that Commonwealth versus McCourt continuing episode or transaction. Here, why wouldn't that be the case?
Well, because they're not in such close proximity. Certainly that argument could be made by the government as to the natural rape that's charged, because there's evidence that it took place in the bathroom. And I think the rationale of these cases is that when the two things happen in the same struggle, as it were, so that you really can't tell one or the other, the government doesn't have to prove the order. Even in Tarver, incidentally, Tarver is a felony murder case. Tarver expressly refrains from deciding whether this would do for a rape conviction. In felony murder, as the court knows, that's a much broader scope for sort of bringing people into liability. A point which was re-emphasized in the Handwright case.
No doubt, but rape was the underlying felony for the felony murder.
In Tarver, yes, and in Tarver, amongst the facts that they cited were that the sexual assault was accompanied by substantial bleeding and the hairs from the inside of the victim's clothing had been forcibly removed from the defendant's pubic area. I mean, a pretty strong indication that the sexual assault and the physical assault all took place at once. It's a case in which there's a violent struggle and the two happen in very close proximity. That's not what's going on here. He leaves that bathroom at 3:07 p.m. The camera catches him with blood dripping off his hand. He's moving about in the school. He talks to his friend who testified here. He goes and gets the barrel. He's back in the bathroom. Then he's traipsing around outside the school. It's at least a half hour, maybe an hour, before the second incident occurs. He's got to get her out of the barrel and into that area of the woods, and position is posed on the ground. So this is not the kind of close proximity that they're talking about in Tarver. It's a little hard to tell. There's so little recitation of facts in the case which actually applies it to the rape charge, the more recent case, Waters. It's a little hard to tell what the criteria are, but even there, you do know from those facts that the two events took place in the same place. They don't tell you anything else, but they're on the same spot, the same piece of ground, in the same apartment, forget which, when the two things happen. This is spatially removed, it's temporally removed, there's intervening events, and certainly the inference that she was dead before she was removed from the bathroom is very strong, and it supports this theory.
Okay, so your argument basically, though, is that there's no logical nexus between the time and place as it relates to the alleged rape in the woods, from which one could find that she was alive, such that the continuing episode or continuing transaction would apply.
Correct.
Okay. Ms. McDougall, let me I understand the evidence about the blood on the stick, the histological slides, and the medical examiner not being able to say unequivocally that Ms. Ritzer was dead at the time. And you can re-argue all those issues, and I'm happy to hear from you. But my question really is, has this continuing transaction or continuing episode concept ever been used for two separate rapes? And I'm not aware that it has.
It has, because I don't think it usually carries any weight.
Well, okay. So what I've looked at cases from a lot of jurisdictions, not just Massachusetts, and I'll hear your arguments on whether or not there's a possibility that Ms. Ritzer was alive at the time, and whether or not under Lattimore there's enough to allow that a natural aggravated rape to go to the jury, and the felony murder for rape on what occurred in the woods to go to the jury. But I'm having a sort of preliminary issue, which is any application of the continuing transaction or continuing event to apply to two different rapes in two different locations. And I didn't find any cases.
I'm not aware of any cases, Your Honor, but I think what's significant in terms of a continuing transaction is that there is a reasonable inference that the defendant may have been interrupted in the rape in the bathroom by Danielle Bedard, so that he clearly had ejaculated to some extent, but I would note there were only 2 sperm cells noted by Ms. Scott. He had not, the Commonwealth would suggest, had the ability to complete what he sought to do to Ms. Ritzer. And I would suggest that that is what links, in part, the 2 sexual assaults, that he was less looking to dispose her body than looking for a place to finish what he had started. And I would point to the fact that she isn't just raped in the woods. She's posed. She's displayed for those who ultimately find her, not just with the branch, but by the way her clothing is positioned and by the legs are positioned. I would respectfully take issue with the presumption that she was clearly dead in the bathroom. The only evidence of that comes from Mr. Pimentel, and I would suggest that his description of the bathroom has to be weighed against a couple of things. One is his demeanor in discussing the bathroom, both then with Mr. Marshall as well as on the stand, as well as the fact that Ms. Bedard does not see any blood. Certainly more blood may have collected during the time she was in the bathroom, but this isn't a case where there was enough blood that Ms. Bedard even noticed it during the brief time she was in the bathroom. I would suggest that there is circumstantial evidence that would suggest that it's not, that not all of the cutting that was ultimately done was done in that bathroom. He spends far more time in those woods than he does in that bathroom. It is only 23 minutes from the time he leaves the bathroom after the initial assault until he is last seen entering the woods. So it's only a 23-minute break during which he is continuously in movement, the Commonwealth would suggest with purpose, to get her stuff and his stuff out of the classroom. He's heading back towards the bathroom. He's interrupted by Mr. S. Garcia. He ultimately goes right then and gets the barrel and brings the barrel right up to the bathroom after initially, I would say, disposing of some clothing from Ms. Quigley. So I would suggest that it is a continuous transaction. The Commonwealth's suggestion is that this was a sexually motivated homicide and that he didn't get a chance to finish the sexual assault in the bathroom, and he did something else in the woods where he spent far more time, I believe a total of 42 minutes if you count both of the trips he takes into the woods, when all else he had to do was cover her in leaves, which were abundant, was dump the recycling barrel and other items haphazardly, throwing them down the things, and bury the shoes. And yet he spends 42 minutes in those woods. So the Commonwealth would suggest that this was a sexually motivated crime and that he didn't get to finish what he started in the bathroom, and he finished it in the woods.
So, assuming without commenting on the burden of persuasion in this regard, but assuming that those inferences are reasonable, there's one case from another state that talks about how if the victim was dead, how appalling and disgusting it is, and that it constitutes certain crimes, but not the crime of rape. And and certainly what the Commonwealth alleges happened in the woods is relevant on a multiplicity of issues, including the intent in the bathroom. But the fact that, to use the Commonwealth words, he hadn't finished the sexual assault yet does not necessarily answer the question about the continuing transaction, because at the core of the two Massachusetts cases that we have is the possibility that in those cases that the victim was alive. And so how long it took and whether or not he had finished the sexual assault is not dispositive. So I think we need to look at whether or not...
well, the reason I didn't touch on that issue is because the court had just noted that it was familiar with the evidence. As the Commonwealth's position is there is a strong possibility she was alive, particularly if all of the neck wounds were not inflicted in that bathroom. That in fact what got Dr. McDonald to come down to her time frame was the assumption made by Mr. Osler in his questions, rightfully so, that all of those neck wounds were inflicted at the same time. And I would respectfully suggest that there is evidence to the contrary, that while there may be a lot of blood in the bathroom, there's very little blood on the defendant when he exits the bathroom after only 11 minutes, during which he had to ambush her, asphyxiate her, do some amount of cutting, and rape her in 11 minutes. And then he only has blood on one hand. As disturbing as that hand is, it's not a lot of blood. It's only when he emerges from the woods that he is covered in blood, all down the front of his pants, which is Colleen Ritzer's blood. That he's no longer wearing his socks, which are found saturated with red-brown stains in the woods. So the Commonwealth would, there's not blood visible at all on his sneakers when he is in the school. It is only when his sneakers are recovered from the woods that one of them is saturated with blood. So I would suggest respectfully there is circumstantial evidence to suggest there was significant cutting that happened in those woods.
All right. The court will deny the required finding as to the armed robbery and rule tomorrow morning on the rape in the woods. I'm going to review the cases from other jurisdictions as it relates to continuing transaction.
In the event that the court directs the Commonwealth out as to the rape as a standalone charge, we would still be asking that the felony murder go to the jury on an attempted aggravated rape, and I would point to Commonwealth versus Jeans.
Okay.
Right. I would just emphasize that the felony murder criteria is different than the criteria for liability of rape, even though rape is potential because of the attempt. For one thing, it accompanies attempt, and for another thing, there's a second rape charge in the case.
All right. Well, if I'm inclined to direct out the rape in the woods, we'll address the issue of the availability for felony murder, and if not, then that'll be a moot issue. All right. So, are there any issues relative to the witnesses, as long as we have a couple of minutes here tomorrow morning, that are significant evidentiary issues?
Your Honor, I need to remind myself of the lineup. The only issues I see are, I know there were some photographs that Ms. Regan had provided me of the defendant as a child. I didn't know if she intended to introduce those tomorrow. I would want to be heard on that. I believe there are also some records of the defendant's grandmother and aunt, which Ms. Oker intends to introduce through the grandfather. I'm not objecting to their admissibility, but I may want to be heard on the extent of them. I believe there's a case that talks about it becoming duplicative, and we are talking about a lot of records going back several decades, and I may want to be heard on limiting those, although I don't know that that would need to happen in real time. That may be something we could address later, because I'm not objecting to their admissibility, I'm just objecting to the volume.
All right, and I think the point of the volume and the case you're referencing deals with the basis for the opinion. So the basis for the opinion, as it relates to family history, I assume is the purpose for the records, Ms. Oker. All right. Court will be in recess then until tomorrow morning.
All rise.